I warned you, this is a long intro. A year's worth of pictures takes a while to show you. I'm gonna take 3 copyright claims for this intro.
усіх єдину наш гордий клич, народові несе, вітчизні будь, ти вірний без зупину, нам Україна вище понад все. Вітчизні будь, ти вірний без зупину, нам Україна вище понад все. Слава для нас закон, найвищий то наказ, соборна українська є держава, одна навік, пісяну фотограф. Соборна українська є держава, одна навік, пісяну фотограф.
Hello, and welcome. And I've got to fix my layout because it's slightly off kilter. Sorry. Stand by. I'll fix this. Just a minute. There we go. That's better. That's slightly better. Anyway, thank you for allowing me to indulge and to share with you a project that has taken me several days to compile and put together. This is the War Room, and today is day 1, year 1 of the war in Ukraine. Or, if we go by just consecutive dates, today is day 366. And I'm pretty sure I screwed up the scroller, because now that I'm thinking about it, oh no, I did do it correctly. Cool. Okay. So yeah, apparently Pwnery did everything right for once. Show prep, intro, probably going to get hit with 3 copyright claims, and I'm okay with that, because I don't do this for money. I don't do this for anything. I just do this because I'm cataloging a moment in history, and I'd like to say that at the end of whatever is going to happen, that I had a very small part into presenting it to you, or to whoever watches this. So, I did my part. It's been a very odd year. Like I said before, and I titled the intro, it's the war that nobody asked for. And I have a slight rant because right now in my green room, I have the strangest actually, no, Mike, I have an update about that. I'll talk about that later. I have a really strange situation going on right now because the people that I've been grooming for this episode the entire week aren't here for whatever reason. And the people who haven't been around to be prepared for this episode are here. So I'm grateful for that. We have an incredibly long show tonight. For instance, once upon a time, in the beginning of this, I was able to give you the War Room every night because there was enough material for me to present you enough stories to make like an hour show, 1 hour. As the war progressed, the stories were fewer and further between, so I sort of changed the format slightly to mimic my week in review that I used to do before the War Room. And that's kind of stuck for the longest time. Towards the end of November and December, because the winter had set in, activity had slowed down so much that sometimes we would have to go every other week, not just 1 week. And I'm not a fan of doing that because trying to keep viewer retention was really important because obviously this is an event that's very important. Um, but if there's no stories, I don't want to waste your time. Today, however, is different. Today is the 1 year anniversary. Actually, technically yesterday, if you want to go 365, today's the 366th day. So, especially because of the international dateline and Zulu time and all that good stuff, right? But today's different. Today there's like 30 stories. So, if you can't sit through the entire show tonight, I understand. And I don't hold it against you. It's gonna be big. And what I have planned for the end of the show is a little bit like what we did last week. I'm starting to put some of my psychology and sociology expertise to work here because now I'm going to give you a segment where we postulate what's going on or what we think is going on. And strangely enough, one of my panelists said he mimicked something that we were told a long time ago in jest. And he was like, but we don't know shit about war. Well, let me enlighten you. This is going to be one of the biggest I told you so sessions I've ever done because every single thing that we have talked about on this show for a year has happened. It has come to pass almost to the letter. So I guess we know shit about war because I know how the human condition works and you can predict what's going to happen based off of that. I'm not saying that I did it alone. My panelists have helped me do this. We got it right. So that's what you're going to see today. We're going to have a segment at the end. That's the part, if you catch me on replay, that you're going to want to watch. Because if we got it right this far, there's a good possibility that what's going to happen next is pretty much something we're going to detail for you. I hope it doesn't happen, but war never changes, to borrow a quote from Fallout. So anyway, before they lose their consciousness, I'm going to bring in my panelists. And one of them I know is AFK right now because he worked a full shift today and he just got off of work and I didn't even expect him to be here. But I'll just bring him in the room muted, and then when he gets here, we'll deal with it. So my sort of ride or die so far throughout most of the year, I give you Mikhail Naikstrajski. So good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, and I want to preface this
Yes?
with, we don't know shit about war, but we're still going to cover it.
Because we got it right so far, so why would we stop now?
I don't know if we got it right, but
We got it all right. No, we got it all right. Like I backlogged every episode. I keep it in one gigantic file, and I'd spent the last 2 weeks going over it to create the montage for
part
tonight's
of
intro.
Taiwan. I was right about Taiwan.
We were right about everything. We didn't miss anything. We got it all.
At the beginning, at the beginning, you said that China was going to invade Taiwan right away, and I told you they weren't. They were going to watch.
We didn't say when they were going to do it. We just said that they were going to probably do it.
And they still might. I give you that.
Yeah.
But with what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, I think they're hesitant to do it. So
Maybe still, and you might be right. And we'll get to that at the end of the show, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And
Also,
when I
did
tell
you
you about
check
what
the-
happened to my truck, by the way, it's gonna probably piss you off more than it's gonna make you laugh. But
maybe both. But did
No.
you check that post I posted just earlier? Because if we can work that in somehow, we really need to because it lists all the countries in the UN that are against Russia,
yeah,
and all those that are for, and those that can't.
I've got it
determine whether
listed.
they have a dick in their hand or they're pussying out.
I've got it in listed. I've got it listed in the stories tonight.
Okay, all right.
So,
Good.
knowing that this is going to be a long show, go grab a cocoa or a bourbon or whatever's going to keep you awake. Because I will say, good evening to everybody. Let me just start from the beginning, okay? So I have Shady Hill, who always gets here before anyone else. Terry Scherer's here. The bearded guy's here. Bjorn, who is supposed to be in my green room right now, is, I think, here. Um, let's see. Mike Z is here. Eric Mortenson's here. We have a Gunpowder Beauty here. I'm flattered that you made it. Thank you. So, they're all here. So, let's just go ahead and get started because we have a very, very long show. I'm so sorry for this, but it's hard, like I said in the intro. It's hard to get a year's worth of material crammed into something that's digestible.
Listen, if any of the articles blend into each other, just
I'll
cover
cut them
one and
short.
skip
I
the
have a lot
next
of short
one,
ones. We got a lot of short ones.
All right.
So anyway, just the quick synopsis. Day 1, year 1. We've hit the milestone for a war that nobody has asked for. As we have for the past year, we have predicted, postulated, and presented you with stories of the war. A lot of what we've been reporting has come to pass. The world is in denial that it is at war, as if not calling it out for what it is will somehow make it go away or diminish its value. Atrocities have been recorded and shown to the world for a full year, including confirmed genocidal mass murders in several cities across Ukraine. Nations hum and haw in their marble meeting rooms, NATO and the UN. But at the end of the day, nations all over the world have still chosen sides. They're on the record. Military, humanitarian, and financial aid has poured in from all sides. Weapons from proxy nations all over the world are being beta tested or validated as modern weapons of war. A gathering of allies has been defined, and a conglomeration and confirmation of a new Axis power begins to take shape. This is what world war looks like, whether you want to admit it or not. That's what we're going to talk about today. I've brought you all the stories that sort of support this. We're going to conclude tonight's episode with what I call a sociological what if. And we're going to sort of go around the room if more people come in later, and we're going to go over the merits or the possibilities of what we're going to do, or what we're predicting. If any of you in the audience want to play along, then you can. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to... The way the game works, you can email me in the address at the link below. And then if I catch your email, I'll read it out loud on air. What the game is going to be is, now that we're a year in, I need you to use your imagination and say you woke up tomorrow morning to the news that the world is at war and this has escalated outside of the boundaries of Ukraine. What I want you to do is I want you to come up with what you think is going to happen on the first day of what you woke up to as World War III. Pick a nation, what branch of service that nation is going to employ, where it's going to employ it, and then ask the question, how will this affect Ukraine or Russia, and how will it affect us geopolitically? Is what they're going to do help, hurt, drag out, or accelerate the conclusion of? And it's funny because the thing I came up with for my example, it's short, sweet, and to the point. So my part of this segment is going to be short. Everyone else's, you can take as much time as you want, and then we'll run it around the room, and we'll just be like, could this happen? Could it be impossible? Or are we just Nostradamus? Pwnery. Sorry. Anyway. Strikestradamus. I like that.
There we go.
Okay. So anyway, what?
I'm sorry. I had to include myself in that because I felt left out.
Now I'm gonna give Scott a break because he has what's it called? It's like herpagona syphilades right now. Like, he woke up near death, so he's probably
Did,
passed
did,
out on NyQuil or something.
did he
So,
get the dreaded you know what?
herpagonocephalides.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I forgot. I think I stick Rona in there somewhere too, I guess. Nah, I don't know. It's
Right.
probably just a cold or something, but he sounded
Right.
like dog shit. Or as I
Yeah,
like to
that's
say, he feels like a bag of smashed assholes.
mm, mm. Some, though depending on how bad off he is, he might look like one too.
So you've seen his picture.
Yeah, I've seen his picture when I didn't want to.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
on
Obviously,
OnlyFans.
obviously we're
Oh!
joking. Ooh, no. Oh, I wouldn't. No.
Okay, okay. We got a lot to get through. We're already half an hour in. Let's go ahead and get started. I promise I'm gonna try to get you guys out of here before midnight. That's my goal. I'm sorry if it goes past. You can catch me on the replay if you can't stay up long enough. But I promise it'll be worth your time. We were very thorough this week. So I'm gonna go back to Friday, February 17th, day 360. And for those of you who are not or who are new to my show format, basically what we're going to do is I'm going to present a couple of stories that support the topic of the day, and then we'll run it around the room. If nobody has anything to add, then we'll just move on to the next story. So, because I have so many stories for you tonight, we're going to get through these as quickly as possible because the real meat and potatoes is what we're going to do at the end. But at least you'll be caught up to date on everything that you missed because you were too busy watching the uh, Alec Murdoch trial. Dude, today was amazing on that. But anyway,
Which short is, it's 10 miles from my house where they're doing this, and it's a pain in the ass because everybody's down frickin' town. And you can't drive.
that
frickin'
really
through.
cute assistant DA was there today.
I know, and if I would ask her out or ask her for a beer if she
Yes.
wasn't surrounded by the sheriff's department, all right?
You're not a criminal. Just be like,
I've tried. They're like, don't talk to him.
you gotta channel your inner butthead. You gotta be like, ha, baba,
I've
wanna
tried.
do
I
it?
really have. I really have.
Anyway, all right. So Friday, February 17th, about a week ago, day 360, and we're gonna start with this. And it's just a photo of Russia. But anyway, Moscow has asked 4 Austrian diplomats to leave Russia in retaliation for expulsion earlier this month of 4 Russian diplomats from Vienna. Austria had accused the Russian diplomats of spying, and Chancellor Karl Nehammer on Friday defended their February 2nd expulsion. He said Austria would not watch idly while espionage occurs in our country and hospitality has been abused. In announcing the expulsion of the Austrian diplomats on Thursday, Russia's foreign ministry called the earlier act by Austria unfriendly and unreasonable, calling into question Austria's previously positioning itself as an unbiased and neutral state. Nehammer rejected the claim that Austria isn't neutral anymore. Western European nations and Russia have expelled each other's diplomats on several occasions following the Russian military operation in Ukraine that started nearly a year ago. Austria, a European Union member that has a policy of military neutrality, was initially hesitant to take such action, but expelled 4 Russian diplomats in April after pressure from the public and fellow EU partners. The Russian diplomats had been given a week to leave Austria, which means they should be gone by today, and Russia said that the Austrian diplomats had until February 23rd, which is yesterday, to go. So, mutually, they pointed to the door and they both said GTFO.
Mutually assured destruction.
Yeah, mutually assured GTFO. And honestly, that's one of those short, sweet, and to the points. I don't really think there's anything to add to that, so we'll just move on. 2 Vice President knee pads. Saturday, February 18th, day 361. I'm going to try to say this without vomiting in my mouth a little bit.
Well, that's not gonna
Vice President Kamala Harris announced that the United States has determined. Oh, he's got to go. Fine. See you later. VP Harris announced that the United States has determined that the Russian military is committing crimes against humanity in its invasion of Ukraine. You don't say.
So what else is new?
Harris made the remarks on Saturday during her speech at the Munich Security Conference in Germany. The United States is firmly determined that Russia has committed crimes against humanity, she says. From the starting days of this unprovoked war, we have witnessed Russian forces engage in horrendous atrocities and war crimes. You guys saw it in the intro monologue. Their actions are an assault on our common values and an attack on our common humanity, she says. She arrived Thursday morning in Munich, where she was greeted by Minister-President of Bavaria, Markus Söder. The conference runs from February 17th to the 19th and gathers world leaders to discuss pressing international security issues, including the war in Ukraine. And let us be clear, Russian forces have pursued a widespread and systematic attack against the civilian population, she continues. Gruesome acts of murder, torture, rape, and deportation, executions, killings, beatings, and electrocution. Russian authorities have forcibly deported hundreds of thousands of people from Ukraine to Russia, including children. The Munich Security Report, which was released on February 13th, includes exclusive data and graphics on current security policy issues and hones in on an authoritarian regime on the global platform as highlighted by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Harris referenced her past as a prosecutor in California during her speech, saying that her career has made her knowledgeable on the nature of criminal cases and the legal process of proving guilt. Because remember, she was a lawyer. Long before I was Vice President of the United States, I spent the majority of my career as a prosecutor. There's a dirty joke in there, but I'm not going to do it. Beginning as a
Not a good idea.
Beginning as a young lawyer in the courtroom and later running the California Department of Justice, she says. She continued, I know firsthand the importance of gathering facts and holding them up against the law. In the case of Russia's actions against Ukraine, we have examined the evidence, we know the legal standards, and there is no doubt that these are crimes against humanity. I'm gonna not be childish about this. I could have. This was the lowest hanging fruit of the entire episode, and I'm gonna refrain. Just this once.
No, I don't think you should.
I will, just this once, because we're trying to be serious about this. But after party, she's fair game. Moving on, unless you have something you want to add to that. I think she's pretty short to the point.
I would like to explain on this.
Go ahead.
This is the same woman that pretty much arrested and prosecuted people for marijuana offenses in her country, as far as
in
California.
Her state.
She's a bad reputation for a prosecutor and lawyer.
Yes, it's a PR stunt, is what it is, because she isn't doing her job anywhere else. So they had to put a camera in front of her to remind people that she's not dead, like Weekend at Bernie's style.
And let me tell you this much, I'm tired of her laughing. She's got the most ugliest looking mug to be laughing.
Nah, Hillary Clinton had the worst one.
Seriously? Because she actually got a child.
No, yours is the worst one.
No, Feinstein does, because she looks like the Wicked Witch of the West.
Yeah, but when she laughs, her face cracks apart like a porcelain doll. Anyway. Hello, Fareed. Okay. Moving on. Let me put this up to here. That picture, someone should tell somebody that turret is on backwards. In recent weeks, a Chinese spy balloon captured the nation's attention. The alarm and outrage among the American people demonstrate a broad consensus to national security. To those who follow foreign policy public opinion, this reaction comes as no surprise. Americans are clear-eyed about the threats we face, but they worry that our government and military might not be up to the task of responding. Policymakers in the new Congress should know Americans are ready for serious action on the multiplying threats to our national security. The latest Reagan National Defense Survey shows an increasing public awareness of the threats emanating from China and Russia. In our nationwide public opinion poll, 81% of Americans are concerned about the threat of rising authoritarianism around the world, up from 75% in 2021. Nearly 2/3 are worried about Russia winning the war in Ukraine, and 3/4 are concerned that the war will expand to NATO countries in Eastern Europe, forcing the United States to be directly involved. If Russia were to attack a NATO ally, most Americans support that U.S. involvement. Americans are concerned that Russian aggression will have spillover effects in other parts of the world, inspiring other authoritarian countries to invade their democratic neighbors. Even before this recent spy balloon incident, China and Taiwan were not far from the minds of most Americans. 7 in 10 worry that within the next 5 years, the United States will be at war with China. They're concerned about China's economic practices, its military buildup, and its human rights abuses. But they do not believe that we have a clear strategy to manage our relationship with China. Less than half think that the United States has the best military capabilities in the world. Even fewer think that we have the best high-tech capabilities. With this assessment of the strategic landscape, here are 3 things Congress and the Biden administration must achieve. 1. Invest in the old practice from the previous administration of peace through military strength. In the face of Chinese military investment and Russian military aggression, we must rebuild American hard power to bolster deterrence, reestablishing the peace in Europe and maintaining the peace in the Indo-Pacific. According to our survey, increasing defense spending has widespread public support. 3/4 favor a higher military budget, including supermajorities, more than 2/3 of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. Congress should provide funding for a bigger Navy, which they have. They have just recently passed a doctrine to have a 500-ship Navy. That hasn't happened since, I think, Vietnam. More conventional weapons and a modernized nuclear arsenal. It should also assist our military with procuring and integrating the cutting-edge technologies we need to compete in the 21st century. 2. Develop a strategy for confronting China, the world's top adversary. Americans identify China as the country posing the greatest threat to the United States, despite Russia's aggression in Ukraine dominating headlines for the last year. 3/4 of Americans now view China as an enemy, up from only 55% in 2018. The newly formed House Select Committee on China represents a laudable first step in addressing this threat. Part of this committee's work should consider ways to strategically separate our economy from China's in industries relevant to national security. Over half of Americans, including a majority of both Democrats and Republicans, support efforts to reduce the amount of trade between the United States and China. Simultaneously, Congress should enhance American support for Taiwan, as bipartisan majorities approve of efforts to deter Chinese invasion, such as increasing the U.S. military presence in the region and increasing arms sales to Taiwan. 3. Uphold American values of freedom and democracy, the fundamental ones, not the political ones. Americans want our country to walk and chew gum when it comes to the Indo-Pacific and Europe. In particular, they want to stand with the people of Ukraine. Nearly 1 year into the war, a majority of Americans still want the United States to continue providing assistance and equipment to the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom. Only 1 in 3 Americans believe that we have enough problems at home and cannot afford to spend more on the conflict and risk further provoking Russia. Americans understand that a freer and more democratic world is one of greater peace and prosperity. Our values are our interests. 7 in 10 Americans want to continue or increase U.S. assistance for democracy advocates abroad. In addition to supporting the fight in Ukraine, Congress should fully fund the National Endowment for Democracy and the U.S. Agency for Global Media as part of our efforts to advance freedom around the world. Policymakers on both sides of the aisle should know that Americans believe, as Ronald Reagan once explained at the 1980 Republican National Convention, the United States has an obligation to its citizens and to the people of the world never to let those who would destroy freedom dictate the future course of life on the entire planet. Our leaders would do well to take a page from Ronald Reagan's foreign policy playbook. I know that comes off as a bit of an opinion piece, and I think it was meant to be. Because the reason that this article leans heavy on support for Ukraine is, if you really think about this on a basic level, you want the war contained there. Because if it breaks out from Ukraine, then you have no choice but to accept the fact that we have entered a third world war. Anything that the world can do to provide Ukraine what it needs to stop it from spreading beyond its borders leads to the very thing that everyone is fighting so hard to deny is happening right now. So the quicker you get what they need to them and stop it there, it has a good chance of not spreading everywhere else and becoming much more difficult to manage. I mean, imagine this, right? Imagine if Adolf Hitler was stopped in only Poland. The entire Second World War would have looked completely different. But because leaders all across the world tried diplomacy with a madman, it spread, and millions died because of it. And it ran for years longer than it needed to. This is the cost of this conflict. People talk about the cost of how much the United States has provided to Ukraine. We covered it last week. We have provided $200 billion to Ukraine in the last year. It sounds like a lot of money. For most of us individuals, it is a lot of money. If you look at the U.S. national budget, it's a drop in the bucket. Also, if you look at the amount of money that the number 2 nation in this alliance has provided, it's Germany. And they were only 28 billion less than us. So this isn't even a case of y'all need to pay your fair share. Think about what Germany has done for the EU in the last 20 years. They've bailed out Greece and Spain twice.
Several times.
Twice. And they still had enough money to put up $172 billion in aid in Ukraine. And we're bitching about $200 billion and no one else is helping? I think people need to get their facts straight. On top of that, I'll give you an even funnier statistic. Do you know how much $200 billion today was worth in 1941, the year the United States entered World War II? I did the math. $9.5 million.
Million.
Doesn't sound like much, does it? Here's where it gets even better. The entire cost of World War II, adjusted for today's money, $4 trillion with a T. That is 4,000 billion. Don't cry about 200 billion to me, because it is literally a drop in the bucket when the world is at war. Now it doesn't seem like such a big figure, does it? Let's move on, unless you have something to add to this.
No, I'm good.
Okay, let's move on, because we still have a ton of stuff to go through.
I know we do.
All right. I'm going to show you the man who reminds me of the vampire in 30 Days of Night, because he's got those cold eyes. Blinken. Sunday, February 19th, day 362. Secretary of State Antony Blinken bat down the idea that the United States is in a, quote, Cold War with China, claiming that relations between Washington and Beijing can't be reduced to something as simple as a bumper sticker. This is obviously among the most consequential but also complex relationships that we have, and probably the same can be said by many other countries around the world. And of course, we're in a vigorous competition with China, and that's something we're not all shy about. Blinken said this to NBC's Chuck Todd during an interview aired on Meet the Press last Sunday. Todd, noting how the U.S. is expanding its military presence in Guam, the Philippines, and Australia, helping Japan change its national security posture, and continuing to arm Taiwan, challenged Blinken. If it's not a Cold War, then what the hell is it? We intend to compete very vigorously. We've taken important steps over the last couple of years to invest in ourselves so that we can compete effectively, but also to align with allies and partners around the world so that we have a shared approach to the same challenges that China poses, Blinken continued in response. As we're doing that, we have a strong interest in trying to manage the relationship responsibility and to make sure, to the best of our ability, that competition doesn't ever veer into conflict or into another Cold War. I don't think that's in our interests, and also it's important to note that if there are some very big issues out there that are affecting all of our citizens and are affecting people around the world, where if we can, it would be in our best interest to find ways to cooperate. On climate, global health, and the macroeconomic situation around the world, he added. And we have a responsibility to at least try to do that. So that's why I say that you can't reduce this to a bumper sticker or to a label. It's complicated, it's consequential, and we need to manage it responsibly. Blinken also appeared on ABC's This Week and CBS's Face the Nation, on the heels of what has been reported as a confrontational meeting with Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference. Blinken reportedly spoke directly to Wang about the unacceptable violation of U.S. sovereignty and international law by China flying a high-altitude surveillance balloon across the U.S., warning that the Irresponsibility Act must never again occur. Blinken also confirmed to ABC's host Martha Raddatz that the Chinese diplomat offered no apology for the episode. On the contrary, Wang said that at the Munich Security Conference, that the U.S. military shooting down the Chinese spy craft off the coast of South Carolina after the surveillance balloon was detected above Montana and traversed the entire United States was absurd and hysterical, claiming our Cold War mentality is back. More than 40 countries have had these balloons go over their territory, Blinken told ABC. So there's a real concern I'm having here from other countries, allies and partners alike, about this program. And I think countries are, I was going to say pleased, but pleased is probably the wrong word. They appreciate the fact that we exposed it. Once over the United States, the balloon attempted to surveil very critical, important military installations. We protected the sensitive information that it was trying to surveil, Blinken told Raddatz. At the same time, we got information about the balloon itself, as was traversing the country going west to east. And then when it was safe to do so, and there was no danger to people on the ground, the president ordered that it be shot down. Blinken said that he also warned Wang that there would be consequences for China sending lethal support to Russia in the war against Ukraine. Now, I posted this story because I wanted you all to hear the absolute word salad garbage coming out of his mouth. Because this is what he does, Antony Blinken. I'm sorry I wasted 4 minutes of your time reading it, because I came out of what he said just as confused as you probably got confused hearing it from me. But this is what he does, and this is why I say that we're being led by idiots. because he is one. I have nothing to add to this story. I just wanted to show it to you. Let's
no
move
one
on.
argues that we're being led by idiots, right?
Yes. Yes. Especially when they've got the dead soulless eyes of a monster from 30 Days of Night like he does.
Can I add to this?
Go ahead.
The only answer that China would actually listen to, it's not words. I hate to say it, it's fucking brute force.
Possibly. Possibly. I'm not saying
It's
I don't agree
communist
with
China.
you.
They don't listen.
The thing that hurts the Chinese the most, you have to remember, my boss is of the
He's
country.
random?
Like, his family came from there. He has an insight to it, right? And even he says that the worst way you can hurt China is to not need them anymore. And what he meant by that is China is the world's manufacturer. Now, I left that open-ended because you can say it's the world's manufacturer of steel. They have killed the steel industry in the United States because they can produce it cheaper. You could say that they are the world's manufacturer of cheap goods. That's undeniable. I mean, AliExpress is literally their playground, right?
How
Wish.com,
about
playground.
what
Half of
about the
Amazon.
banking industry?
What's that?
The banking industry. Theoretically, they have a massive amount of our finances in them too, aren't they?
They hold a massive amount of the world's trade debt.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Yes. And the thing is I don't know how much sway that has. If the entire world defaulted on China's loans, they would economically collapse. And yet people are afraid of the trade deficits with them. Because the other part of China is the world's manufacturer of ... is cheap labor. Otherwise, the world wouldn't have outsourced all of their laborious tasks to China. There's a reason why we have to invest in the country now. There's a reason why there's a flight to quality now. There's a reason why we have to spin up factories to produce our own microchips now. Because for the last 4 or 5 decades, we kept cheaping out and outsourcing it abroad. We created the monster known as China. Not the United States, we the world. We created them.
Yep. Dumb question too. The electric vehicles, are some of those components made from China? The Teslas, all of them.
Almost all of them.
And that's why I was quite curious. Like, these batteries they're coming off them are like $50,000 or something.
I don't know. If you mean like in repairs?
Yeah.
A Prius, the first gen Prius, the battery replacement was somewhere between $8,000 to $12,000. The latest Prius, the latest couple of models, it was like $20,000 to $25,000. A Tesla, there's a warranty for the battery. My boss has had 3 of them. There's a warranty for the battery where they comp you the first one or something like that. But after that, it comes out of pocket. Thankfully, one of his was so bad that he lemon lawed it out, and they gave him a brand new dual motor version. And then even then, he only kept it for like 6 months. They're crap.
I knew Tesla was not just made out of the United States. No, most of their stuff's sold from China.
They're crap. I'm sorry, they're crap. Like, okay, the electric, the solely electric car, right? The plug-in electric car,
exactly,
is no different. You've heard me, if you're on our server throughout the week, you have heard me use the phrase "laptops on wheels." Think about what that means. Think about, like, you people in the audience, think about laptops, notebook computers when you were in college, or if you are in college, right? You buy a laptop, you use it every day for a couple of years, and then the battery goes crap, and you have to buy a new battery, which costs a lot of money, typically. And if it goes crap after several years, sometimes you can't even buy a replacement battery because there's already been 10 different models that came out after it, right? It is a disposable, consumable commodity. that you don't expect to make last for a long time. You just I'll just get another one.
Yeah. You mentioned the battery. How about the software? Because
Yeah, you
like
can
a
get
laptop,
NVIDIA.
nobody get what I'm saying. Like it'd be like upgrading a new model, and after that,
Well, that's the problem, you see. These are disposable things, laptops. And it produces a lot of. You got to remember, I've been in IT since I was a teenager, right? Like my generation created IT, like as we know it today.
Yep.
Mike's
Well,
generation, he's not that much younger than me, but Mike's generation picked it up and took it even further than mine did. And
Right.
then say somebody of like your generation, Warsaw, your generation took it even further. You see what I'm saying? Like it all built off of the next one and the next one and the next one. The
yeah.
problem is
I'm only like 4 or 5
every
years
time
younger.
I know the problem is every generation of hardware before is waste,
It's
right?
nothing but garbage.
There are landfills full of PCBs and circuit boards because they're not really recyclable, right? They're garbage. Now, imagine that for electric cars with batteries that are so big and are full of so many minerals that are toxic. They were toxic to get them, and they're even more toxic to dispose of them. This was never the solution, and yet the world keeps peddling it. Why? Because Smeagol Thunberg says we need to have it?
Yes,
Like,
Smeagol.
What
Yes.
what does that fucking retarded dropout, what qualifies her to even demand that? Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. And
Or
yet the
Greta
world
Thunberg.
eats out of her hand. Like let me put this to you. Let me pose this to you, okay? Greta Thunberg wears clothes and bangs away on a notebook computer or a tablet, all of which would not be possible without the petroleum industry, while riding on a diesel electric train, eating her meal with one-time use disposable plasticware. And she's going to tell you how to save Johnny Polar Bear?
Oh, let me ask you this: how old is she?
20?
She's 20.
She's up there somewhere now.
No, look up her age real quick.
21, something like that.
Let me look up her real quick.
All I'm saying is,
She does not look like a 20-year-old.
no, she looks like Smeagol.
She does.
Like
Mhm.
I keep saying this. She has one fate, one destiny, and that is to sleep with David Hogg and create the world's ugliest baby. That is her purpose.
Let me look here. Her age. She was
We're
born
going
in
to move on to the
2003.
next story.
Yeah, 20 years. You're right. 20 years.
We're going to move on to the next story because we've got so many to go through.
Oh no, so many.
You might remember this guy as the Ace of Spades. I
Eight,
I may have said that that we should have created a new deck of cards for the dangerous people in this conflict. This man is the Ace of Spades. He's the most dangerous one that's on the battlefield because he's young. Prigozhin is an old man. He's not as dangerous. He's more like the Queen of Hearts. A little further down the list. He's still dangerous, but he's not the Ace of Spades. This guy is. Hillary Clinton would be the suicide king. Anyway, Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov, key ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, and a vocal proponent of the invasion of Ukraine, praised the mercenary group Wagner on Sunday and said that he wants to create his own private military force. Sidebar. Sidebar. Didn't he do that already? Because Chechnya is sort of split in 3 pieces.
This was the guy that was given by Putin his own private military. Yes, and he was the head commander.
More or less. Yeah.
This was during after the Chechen War.
Yes, that's the guy. Yes. The Wagner Group was founded in 2014 by Yevgeny Prigozhin, another close associate of the Russian president, who has been referred to as Putin's chef. because his restaurants and catering companies have scored countless government contracts. So he's the Wolfgang Puck of Russia? What the puck? Anyway,
Wolfgang.
what the puck? Anyway, uh, before deploying in Ukraine at the outset of Putin's invasion last year, the Wagner Group was active across the Middle East, Africa, and even Venezuela. We can say confidently that Wagner has shown its mettle in military terms and has drawn a line under discussions about whether or not such private military companies are needed. Kadyrov, who has led Chechnya since 2007, wrote this on a post on Telegram last Sunday. When my service to the state is completed, I seriously plan to compete with our dear brother Yevgeny Prigozhin and create a private military company. I think it'll all work out. About 50,000 Wagner forces are active in Ukraine. A large majority of them are convicted criminals who were freed from prison just to join Putin's war. White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby confirmed this last month. Small update, they're not doing that anymore. They're not doing the dirty dozen thing anymore. I think they stopped it. The Russian Defense Ministry has long denied any connection to the Wagner Group, and U.S. intelligence suggests that there is a growing rift between top Russian military officials and Prigozhin, Kirby added. The Treasury Department designated the Wagner Group as a transnational criminal organization last month, saying that Putin has resorted to relying on the Wagner Group to continue his war of choice. Wagner personnel have engaged in an ongoing pattern of serious criminal activity, including mass executions, rape, child abductions, and physical abuse in the Central African Republic and Mali, the Treasury Department said on January 26th. He is a man of appreciable beardage. I'll give him that. Anyway, I can't grow that shit. No way. I just have a goatee.
I can, but it takes a while.
Yeah. All right, moving on.
You see me with ridiculous beards.
We are now into Tuesday, so we're getting along. We're getting there.
Kind of.
All right. And that was a photo taken, I believe, Monday morning.
It was a Tuesday.
Well, we got the news on Tuesday. President Biden arrived in Ukraine's capital city of Kyiv early Monday morning in a surprise visit just ahead of the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion. Biden delivered remarks and met with President Volodymyr Zelensky at Mariinsky Palace to announce an additional $500 million in U.S. assistance. The new assistance includes shells for howitzers, anti-tank missiles, air surveillance radars, and other aid, but no new advanced weaponry. The trip is the first time Biden has traveled to Ukraine since Russia launched its invasion 1 year ago. I think it's his first time to visit since his son ripped off the country too, if I'm not mistaken.
We don't talk about that. We're not.
I talk about that. Biden was expected to visit Poland on Monday to mark the one-year anniversary since the war began, but instead embarked on a nearly 10-hour train ride from the Polish border to visit Ukraine's capital. Biden said that he visited Ukraine to meet with Zelensky to reaffirm our unwavering and unflagging commitment to Ukraine's democracy, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. He noted that Russian President Vladimir Putin was dead wrong in believing Ukraine was weak when he had launched his invasion a year ago. I am meeting with President Zelensky and his team for an extended discussion on our support for Ukraine, he says. I will announce another delivery of critical equipment, including artillery, ammunition, anti-armor systems, and air surveillance radars to help protect the Ukrainian people from aerial bombardments. And I will share that later this week we will announce additional sanctions against elites and companies that are trying to evade or backfill Russia's war machine. Over the last year, the United States has built a coalition of nations from the Atlantic to the Pacific to help defend Ukraine with unprecedented military, economic, and humanitarian support. My dog's having a nightmare. Biden also said that he's looking forward to meeting with Polish President Andrzej Duda and the leaders of our Eastern flank allies as the United States looks to continue rallying the world to support Ukraine. He departed the Ukrainian capital in the early afternoon local time after spending roughly 5 hours in the city. Sirens can be heard in war-torn Ukraine as Biden arrived in the country. The U.S. has already supported Ukraine with tens of billions of dollars in financial aid and military equipment. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida also announced $5.5 billion in aid for Ukraine as Biden visited with Zelensky. Biden's visit comes just before Russia is expected to ramp up its offensive once again in its own acknowledgement for the one-year anniversary of the conflict. Ukrainian officials warned, Ukrainian officials warned of a massive barrage of missiles that Russia may launch, today, Friday 24th. Russia has continued its attack despite Western sanctions and losses on the battlefield. Ukraine has received waves of support from mostly Western countries supporting its defense against Moscow's invasion. A number of U.S. lawmakers have said supporting Ukraine should be a top priority, but some have criticized decisions to continue giving financial aid without proper oversight. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has said that Ukraine should not receive a, quote, blank check, but the Biden administration has vowed to support Zelensky's regime for as long as it takes. I'm really on the fence on that. I'm sort of okay with that, because I told you about the containment thing. That's what I believe. I'm not saying I'm right. It's what I believe. I'm not John Fetterman. I'm not going to say it like 10 times. Oh, look, he made it to the green room. Let me introduce to you. I call him Techno Viking. You probably know him as Bjorn. So now he is in the chat with us. He's been watching for a couple of weeks, so he knows how the show works. So I will ask at the end of every story if he wants to chime in. If he has something to say, then he'll say it. If he doesn't, we'll move on to the next story. Which is what we're about to do now. Alright, so this guy on the left, you know the idiot in the middle. Polish President Andrzej Duda is expected this week to press President Biden during his Warsaw visit to increase the number of permanent U.S. troops in nations along Russia's borders. Biden's visit comes after Monday's surprise trip to Ukraine, where he met with President Zelensky. All this happening just days ahead of the one-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine, and Poland is looking for a little acknowledgement for the role it has played aiding Ukraine. I think one of the purposes of President Biden's visit to Poland is actually to emphasize support, U.S. support, to Poland. This came from Adrian Kubicki, Poland's Consul General in New York. It is also important that President Biden listens to what we have to say in terms of how we want to enhance our security. Poland has been a top provider in defensive and humanitarian aid for Ukraine, alongside the U.S. since the war began. Side note, they have also taken in the most political and humanitarian refugees of any other country in the world. Little Clarkson moment for you. Warsaw has not only taken in the greatest number of Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war-torn nation, but it has also led NATO negotiations to push for newer and faster equipment deliveries to Ukraine, including tanks earlier this year. Nearly a dozen nations have pledged tanks for Kyiv, and Poland is now working with allied nations to review whether warplanes could be next on the defensive aid itinerary. However, Kubicki pointed that Poland, as well as all Baltic nations near Russia and Ukraine, are under threat from Russian aggression. We would like to see an increased presence, permanent presence, of U.S. troops right at the doorstep of the ongoing war, which is Poland, he says. U.S. troops should be present permanently in our countries given the situation, and what could potentially happen in the future if Russia is, God forbid, successful in Ukraine. Russia has threatened to push its aggression beyond Ukraine's borders since the war began, setting its sights on Moldova, which is west of Ukraine, where a contingent of Russian sympathizers remain in an area known as Transnistria. I wonder if you talk them out of it if they're detransnistrians.
Oh, that's bad. That is bad.
Sorry.
Even for you.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said earlier this month that Kyiv had thwarted a Russian plot to overthrow the Moldovan government, a claim that the Moldovan government confirmed, which reignited concerns regarding Moscow's overall aggression towards Europe. Kubicki said that Poland believes Russia is incapable of overthrowing Kyiv, as Russian President Vladimir Putin originally intended, or of invading another European nation. However, he warned that Moscow is playing the long game. Putin has time, he says. We know long term. Poland actually learned the hard way through our history that this ambition is still valid. It doesn't have to happen immediately. If we do not fail to stop this outrageous invasion of Ukraine, we are 100% certain that eventually Putin will attempt to invade other countries. So, there's one thing I saw in here. Yes. There's one thing I saw in this story that really caught my attention. If you look in Okinawa, Japan, they're very... First of all, the Japanese, by and large, are some of the most painfully polite people you'll ever meet. They just are. Most of them are very polite people. And in Okinawa, they have been very politely insisting that U.S. military presence go away. Like, we have occupied that country since 1945. They're kind of like, look, we're good. You can go now. And, truth be told, they're not really wrong, are they? Like, we've been there a long time. They're pretty stable now. They're not beating war drums. We can go. We can leave. We have Korea, right?
Yep.
So it's kind of funny that Poland is the exact opposite. They're like, yo, occupy us, please. It's kind of weird to hear. But when you consider Poland's history of invasion, you completely understand it. You're like, no, that is his ultimate CYA. Yo, come occupy, because you've just made our border that much stronger by just being here. I get it. I do get it. And he's got room to make that request because he has done so much for his neighboring country of Ukraine that he kind of needs a solid right now. Like, deal me a solid, bro. That kind of thing, right? He's not wrong. At least I don't think he's wrong. If you guys think he's wrong, chime in. But I think he's well within his rights to ask these things. We can move things from other countries that don't need occupation anymore if it's about sheer numbers, Like, what if we take 20% from Okinawa and like 10% from Korea and then just, 5% here and there and everywhere. And you can build up a force and put them in Poland where they're the most needed right now. That makes sense to me. Y'all, what do you think? That means you guys.
I don't know. I'm going with what you're going with.
Okay. I mean, it's a bit of it is a bit of a complicated thing to just put on you all at once, but just kind of keep stuff like this in mind because this is gonna keep coming back. It's how war works. All right, let's move on. We're gonna talk about China.
China.
Yep, chicken to China, the Chinese chicken. Okay. Diplomatic relations between the U.S. and China deteriorated further on Monday after China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs snapped at the Biden administration for suggesting that it has information suggesting that China is considering sending weapons and ammunition to Russia to help its war against Ukraine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made that accusation Sunday, where he said Chinese companies have already began supplying Russia with non-lethal aid and may soon do more. The concern that we have now is, based on the information that we were given, that they're considering providing lethal support, and we've made very clear to them that that would cause a serious problem for us in our relationship, Blinken said. When asked about lethal aid China might deliver, Blinken simply said, weapons. Sidebar, I would say Rona. Anyway,
Sidebar, he doesn't know because he's an idiot.
Blinken?
Yes.
Well, yeah, but he's doing what he's told. That remark drew a furious comment from China on Monday, but not an outright denial, even as China's top diplomat was expected to travel to Moscow later the week. It is the U.S., not China, that has been pouring weapons onto the battlefield, Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Wang Wenbin said. The U.S. is in no position to tell China what to do. We would never stand for finger-pointing or even coercion and pressuring from the U.S. on our relations with Russia. Wang said that China supports peace and took another shot at the U.S. by saying it's the U.S. that is prompting conflict by arming Ukraine. The international community is fully aware who is calling for dialogue and striving for peace, and who is fanning the flames and stoking confrontation, he says.
Can I add on that?
Sure.
First off, don't take a word for what every government says out there. Two, this is a country, as far as China is concerned, put Muslims in a concentration camp and re-educating them by force. Brutality by its corest.
Talking about the Uyghur population.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, okay, fair enough. But the other thing is their statement is that we are promoting conflict by arming Ukraine, right? The thing is Ukraine isn't invading Russia. So his statement is completely without merit. It's like, oh, you're perpetuating a war by giving them weapons. It's like, yes, to defend themselves. They're not on the offensive. They're pushing invaders out of their country. You idiot. They just they're just backwards thinking is what that is. They're just trying to drive a narrative there.
No, but would you take word for what China has to say?
No, you can't take word for word anything anyone has to say. Everyone goes into these declarations with an agenda. If that agenda doesn't align with yours, you're going to find a fault with that. And then you're going to obviously argue it. I mean, we do it every day.
That backwards thinking is how Biden got elected.
Now, I think a bunch of dead people voted for him, but that's just me.
No.
Anyway, let's see. Wang said China would soon release a document proposing a peaceful resolution of the conflict, which will stress that a nuclear war must never be fought and can never be won. Okay, I would agree with that last part, because mutual assured destruction means that you would be the ruler of a garbage heap, and that is worthless. And you will die a slow, agonizing, radiological death. So, yeah, he's right there. I'll agree with that. Thank you for stating the obvious, you putz. Wang also fired back at the U.S. over diplomatic disruption that was caused when the Biden administration confirmed the existence of a Chinese surveillance balloon hovering over the U.S. That discovery prompted Blinken to postpone a scheduled trip to China. Blinken said over the weekend that he met with Chinese officials at the Munich Security Conference to warn that the U.S. would not stand for any violation of U.S. sovereignty, but Wang accused the U.S. of continuing to fuss over the incident. The U.S. itself is the #1 country in conducting surveillance worldwide, whose high-altitude balloons have illegally flown over China multiple times, Wang said, repeating an assertion that the U.S. has rejected. Sidebar, we don't use balloons. Our satellites can see ants. We don't need balloons. You moron. The U.S. is in no position to smear China. The U.S. needs to demonstrate sincerity and acknowledge and resolve the damage its abusive force has done to China-U.S. relations. If the U.S. side continues to fuss over, dramatize, and escalate the unintended and isolated incident, it should not expect the Chinese side to flinch, he added. The U.S. side should be prepared to bear all consequences arising from an escalation. That's tough talk coming from a military that has never proven itself on the field of battle in any measurable conflict. Again, you idiot. Moving on. This is a funny story for me because I just hinted in the last story about China's intention to arm Russia with lethal aid, right? Yeah? Yes? You guys are paying attention, right? This
Somewhat.
story immediately followed after. Russia offered weapons for sale on Monday at the biennial arms fair in the United Arab Emirates, ranging from Kalashnikov assault rifles to complete missile systems, despite facing sanctions from the West over its war in Ukraine.
Whoa. Why are they selling their stuff off when they really need it to fight the Ukrainians?
Exactly! The event, known as the International Defense Exhibition and Conference, and held in the UAE capital of Abu Dhabi, favorite place that Garfield the cat likes to send Odie to, and Nermal, if you are that old to remember those guys, underscores how the Gulf Arab Federation has sought to embrace Moscow while balancing its ties to the West. As Russia's war in Ukraine approaches its first anniversary on Friday, Russian money continues to flood into Dubai's red-hot real estate market. Daily flights between the Emirates and Moscow continue as the war grinds on, providing a rare lifeline for those fleeing conscription and the Russian elite. Oops, I just made a mess. Damn it. The U.S. Treasury has already expressed concerns about the amount of Russian cash flowing into the Arab Peninsula country. The arms fair typically sees the Emiratis host individuals that could be seen as problematic in the West. Former Sudanese strongman Omar al-Bashir came to the 2017 edition. Chechen regional leader Ramzan Kadyrov, himself now deeply involved in the Ukraine war, came in both 2019 and 2021. It's like the Detroit Auto Show for terroristic scumbags, isn't it? Anyway. This year's event drew Libya's Khalifa Hifter, not Hitler, Hifter, the commander of the self-styled Libyan National Army, who faces a U.S. lawsuit accusing him of orchestrating indiscriminate attacks on civilians and torturing and killing political opponents. But while not directly acknowledged at this year's show, the tendrils of Russia's war on Ukraine could be seen everywhere at the fair Monday. To reach Russia's exhibition tent, those attending the fair had to leave Abu Dhabi's cavernous National Exhibition Center and cross along a sky bridge to an outdoor area. Russian officials delayed AP journalists from going inside their tent as an event was going on, initially without explanation. About an hour later, AP journalists saw Denis Manturov, Russia's Minister of Trade and Industry, come out of the tent. Manturov is sanctioned by both the United States and the United Kingdom, with London describing him as, quote, being responsible for overseeing the Russian weapons industry and responsible for equipping mobilized troops in the war in Ukraine. Yet Manturov described the ongoing war as providing advertising for Russian weaponry. Any military action is further accompanied by interest in those products. Those weapons that are in demand in a given military conflict, he said. Therefore, certainly, interest is now high in air defense systems, short, medium, even long-range ones. He added each transaction is subject to close scrutiny from our Western colleagues. They're trying to create obstacles. We ensure the security of such deals so that they are effective, or as effective as possible, and implemented privately. Oh, look, Scott woke up. Emirati officials did not directly acknowledge Manturov's presence. The U.S. State Department did not respond to a request for comment about Russia's presence at the arms show in a country that hosts thousands of American troops. Manturov visited the Emirates as U.S. President Joe Biden was in Kyiv, Ukraine. Inside the Russian tent, a video screen proclaimed the power of Moscow's surface-to-air missile systems, like those now being used to strike cities in Ukraine. Salesmen showed off Kalashnikov assault rifles to Emirati troops. Other model missiles sat on display. Just outside of the tent, Russian helicopters displayed several of its civilian aircraft, flanked by attractive young women in silver flight caps. Like the picture there, actually. UAE leader Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, that's a long name, was not seen at the opening, which was attended by his brother, Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan. However, one Russian magazine at the arms fair printed an English edition that carried photos of Sheikh Mohammed smiling and shaking hands with Russian President Vladimir Putin during an earlier visit to Moscow. In contrast, a giant armed drone by Baykar was parked next to the Russian tent. The Turkish drone company's Bayraktar drones have played such a key role in Kyiv campaigns against Russia. Backyard drones have played such a key role in Kyiv's campaign against Russia that there's even a song in Ukrainian about the aircraft. A short walk away, U.S. Army troops showed off a model of a Javelin anti-tank missile, allowing the curious to fire it in a computer simulation. U.S. Army First Sergeant Evan Williams of the 216th Cavalry Regiment said that he and his soldiers had talked to Russian visitors at the fair and other curious about the weapon, which Ukraine has used to deadly effect against Russian armored vehicles. You've seen people walk by and kind of do a double take about it, said Williams of Boise, Idaho. They come to talk to us and ask questions about it. The U.S. Army also had a Patriot missile battery on display at the fair. American forces used the battery in combat for the first time in decades in 2022 to help defend Abu Dhabi against an attack by Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. Meanwhile, Israel as well had its first full contingent of weapons companies on display, for the first time since the UAE diplomatically recognized the country in 2020. Both Israel and the UAE's leadership have a deep suspicion about Iran's intentions, though the UAE has tried to de-escalate with Tehran, which now enriches uranium closer than ever to weapons-grade levels. Israeli Emirati ties have warmed even as Israel continues to build settlements on the land the Palestinians want their future state, as well as more Israeli-Palestinian violence spikes. So yeah, I wrote this as a side note at the bottom of the story, but I think I said it at the beginning. Don't Russia have a weapon and ammo shortage that needs China's help, to solve right now? Like, what the hell happened to that? Anyway, let's move on. And I'm going to show you the other lapdog. Belarus is
I'll tell you what happened.
Go ahead.
I'll tell you what happened.
Sure.
They replenished all their supply from North Korea because they bought all that surplus back.
Did they buy it, or did they just annex it and demand it?
Well, I don't know if that would go well with North Korea, but
I mean,
they needed it back.
It's Russia, right? It's like they shoved the fat kid to the ground, stepped on his candy bar, and walked over to the weapons, and you're like, we're taking this. You just sit
While
there.
they had their way with his sister.
Ew. Gross. Moving on. Belarus's authoritarian president said Monday that the ex-Soviet nation will form a new territorial defense force amid the fighting in neighboring Ukraine. President Alexander Lukashenko has cultivated close military ties with Russia, which used Belarusian territory to send troops into Ukraine nearly a year ago at the start of what the Kremlin calls its, quote, special military operation. Russia also has maintained about 10,000 troops in Belarus, and the two countries have regularly conducted joint drills as part of their military alliance. Speaking during a meeting with officials Monday, Lukashenko said the country needs to form paramilitary units in every town or village to serve as territorial defense to complement the country's 45,000 military in case of aggression. He added that every Belarusian must learn how to handle weapons to protect their family and home if needed. Defense Minister Viktor Krenin, said Belarus will form a force of up to 150,000 volunteers who will be given weapons but keep their civilian jobs. He noted that its members will form a military reserve in peacetime and could act as guerrillas in case of war. This sounds very Swiss, doesn't it? Like this idea. While hailing the importance of defense cooperation with Russia and expressing support for the Kremlin's action in Ukraine, Lukashenko has emphasized that he will only send Belarusian troops into Ukraine if his country is attacked. The Kremlin has staunchly backed Lukashenko, who has ruled Belarus with an iron hand for almost 3 decades, helping him weather months of massive protests triggered by his re-election in an August 2020 vote that almost everyone in the opposition had denounced as rigged.
It was.
Almost like our 2020 election. Imagine that.
We can't say that, though.
I just did.
You did, but
It's okay. A year from now, I'll get a community strike like Rick does on his show for saying that. Moving on. Told you, some of these are quick stories. This one's called Photo Op. Yeah. Top Republicans on the House Foreign Affairs and Senate Foreign Relations Committee said President Joe Biden's surprise photo op in Ukraine on Monday is not a sufficient response and said that the U.S. needs to send more lethal aid to help Ukraine defend itself from Russia. It's good President Biden visited Ukraine, but a photo op is just not enough, says Michael McCall, Republican of Texas, who chairs the House committee. He needs to get Ukraine the weapons they need to win now, especially ATACMS, Army Tactical Missile Systems, instead of slow-rolling things. The top Republican on the Senate committee, Jim Risch of Idaho, agreed that more lethal force is needed and called on Biden to send fighter aircraft. I hope POTUS's visit to Kyiv will be followed with action, including quickly sending F-16s to Ukrainian forces. We must demonstrate that the U.S. remains committed to helping Ukraine defend itself against Russia's violent aggression. ATACMS is a 190-mile range missile that would far outperform the artillery currently in Ukrainian President Zelensky's arsenal, which have a range of about 50 miles. But last week the Biden administration announced that it would not be sending ATACMS to the front lines in Ukraine because doing so would reduce the U.S. military stockpile to a level that would affect military readiness. But some military experts say that that's an excuse from the White House, and it's pretty weak. Because
They've got plenty of excuses.
Well, because he's already reduced the military stockpile to conduct military readiness by draining the strategic oil reserves. Or did we just forget that happened?
And closing some strategic oil locations like Hawaii.
Yes. But he did admit he had to open more in Alaska, finally.
Well, that doesn't help.
I
That
think it
only
will.
ensures the Battle of Anchorage.
ATACMS is fired by rocket artillery systems that have already been transferred to Ukraine, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies wrote in an op-ed published in the Washington Examiner on Saturday. Modern variants of the missile have a 500-pound warhead and a 300-kilometer range, well beyond the 85-kilometer range of Ukraine's current Western-supplied rockets, the group said. You know, that pisses me off. They're going back and forth between imperial and metric systems. 500-pound warhead with a 300-kilometer range. It's like, look, stick to freedom units, damn it.
Technically, the United States customary units.
Freedom units.
No,
We
customary
look,
units.
look. It's freedom units because we free the shit out of nations with them.
Look. I get what you're saying, but
Yeah.
in the dictionary
Yes.
and in Wikipedia, it says United States customary units.
Fine. Freedom. It's like it's shorter just to say freedom. Anyway, I mean it's such a good word that Ennis Cantor legally changed his name to Ennis Cantor Freedom. That's his new name.
And I'm going.
He's running for public office, by the way.
I'm gonna kick you in the nuts right now by saying, freedom. We gun owners don't know anything about that.
Nah. The hell is that noise? Anyway, the bottom line
Oh,
is
we
that
lost one.
we lost a Warsaw.
Okay.
Damn it. How many times in history have we lost Warsaw?
I don't know.
Bad
Ask the
joke.
Polish.
Anyway, the bottom line is that there are still thousands left in the U.S. and allied stockpiles, the group said. The Biden administration's refusal to send Ukraine F-16s and ATACMS comes even after bipartisan calls to do so. On Thursday, a bipartisan group of lawmakers, including Representatives Jared Golden, Mike Gallagher, sent a letter to the White House to ask Biden to provide Ukraine with increased air superiority capability, including the F-16 Fighting Falcon aircraft requested by Kyiv, or similar fourth-generation aircraft as soon as possible. We believe that providing Ukraine with fourth-generation fighter aircraft represents a sound strategic investment in bolstering Kyiv's military capability and bringing this conflict to a just conclusion, they said. This month, Senator Lindsey Graham, you know him, Richard Blumenthal, Leatherface, and Sheldon Whitehouse wrote the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, in support of sending ATACMS and fourth-generation aircraft to Ukraine. Why, you've heard me say this before. We didn't have to send them F-16s if 1 year ago today we sent them 15 A-10 Warthogs and pointed them in the direction of a 40-mile-long convoy that was stuck in the woods north of Kyiv. Just a thought. Anyway. Now, some of you know that there's a word in Russia. Suka. I promise you that's not what this says.
Yeah, sure.
I put a little caption on the picture. Now, I was thinking of the song. I'm gonna get you, sucker. Anyway, Russian President Vladimir Putin's executive office distributed an internal strategy document in the fall of 2021 that lays out the Kremlin's 10-year plan to take full control of neighboring Belarus, a country north of Ukraine that borders 3 NATO members. Now, remember, Lukashenko is Putin's lapdog, right? And he's been giving Putin whatever he wants, including his chocolate starfish, probably. So I'm going to reread this line again. Russian President Vladimir Putin's executive office distributed an internal strategy document in the fall of 2021 that lays out the Kremlin's 10-year plan to take full control of Belarus. Now, if you're like Lukashenko and you just caught wind of this, don't you think you're going to be a little, I don't know, butthurt about this? Like, bro, I've been giving you everything you asked for and you're still going to take over my country?
It's more like, but I've already handed everything over to you.
Just, you see what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
Belarusian President Lukashenko, who has held the office since 1994 following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, is a close ally of Putin and vocal supporter of the invasion of Ukraine. The internal strategy document details Russia's plans to annex Belarus and create a union state of Russia and Belarus by 2030. The Presidential Directorate for Cross-Border Cooperation authored the scheme, which outlines benchmarks the Kremlin must hit by 2022, 2025, and 2030 to ensure that Russia has control of the information space and that there is a common approach to the interpretation of history in Belarus.
By that document, the Ukrainian conflict should already be over, but it's not.
Yeah, it was supposed to be over in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
The Russian and Belarusian embassies in the U.S. did not return requests for comment on Monday evening. You don't say. Russian forces staged on Belarusian territory ahead of Putin's invasion last year, but Lukashenko has so far declined to get directly involved. Ahead of Lukashenko's most recent visit to Moscow last week, the Belarusian leader said that troops would be deployed only if Ukrainians encroach on their territory. I'm ready to fight together with the Russians for the territory of Belarus, in one case only, if so much as one soldier from Ukraine comes to our territory with a gun to kill my people, he said last Thursday. If they commit an aggression against Belarus, our response will be the most cruel, he repeats. The most cruel.
I hate to say this, but
Yeah.
what's to stop an enterprising Russian officer from going and getting a Ukrainian uniform and doing just that?
You see, this is that part where we were talking about we don't know shit about war, but everything we sort of talked about happened. And what you're
Right?
describing is the future.
Strike Stradamus, I'm telling you.
I'm telling you.
But you know, I just threw that out there because
No,
it just,
it has merit.
you know, I can just see Putin telling one of his officers to do that, even if that officer knows.
I mean,
committing
this is the
suicide
same
by doing
country where opposition keeps jumping out of windows, falling out of 14-story hospital windows because they wanted a cigarette. Now you're smoking in hell. That's a quote from Good, Bad, and the Ugly, I think.
I don't know. Just let me ask this real quick.
Sure.
In your list of things we've got to discuss,
Yes.
you know, further on,
Yes.
have you said anything about Estonia in there?
I think it's in there.
Okay. If it is good, if it's not, I'm gonna mention it because
I'm gonna make people cry when I tell them that we're almost about to hit the halfway mark.
Yeah. Estonia has been uniquely vocal lately when they've been quiet for like the last 20 years.
Yes. They're also a NATO nation, aren't they?
They are. You know, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are all
Baltic states
NATO
that
nations.
are in, yeah.
Former Soviet satellite states that are all NATO nations. How about
Imagine that. It's like all of a sudden they have emerged, and now they have a voice.
Yeah. It's like
It's almost like democracy and freedom gave smaller countries an equal voice at the table. Imagine that.
We've waited 30 years. Now it's our time to
Now's the time.
Yeah. Anyways, continue.
All right. Belarusian Defense Minister Viktor Krenin said Monday that the country will form a new paramilitary force of 150,000 volunteers. The internal strategy document is part of what many Western leaders have warned is Putin's ultimate goal in invading Ukraine. He clearly has much larger ambitions in Ukraine, President Biden said on the day of Russia's invasion last February. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about. Gee, thanks, Joe. Thank you for confirming the fact that you've been listening to the War Room since day one when we said the same thing. That this is nothing more than the machinations and wet dream of a Cold War fucking dinosaur that wants to have the world map look like it did in 1961. Thank you for confirming that.
Well, as I've always said this, and I've said this many, many times, you
Hmm.
can take the KGB agent out of the Soviet Union, but you cannot take the Soviet Union out of the KGB
You
agent.
can't take the borscht out of the Slav. Sorry. Moving on. We have made it to Tuesday,
Oh
February
my
21st.
God!
Yeah, day 364. And you're going to see a lot of his face. I'm sorry. 1 year ago on February 24th, the first major conflict between the world's autocracies and democracies began with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Fortunately, a unified West pushed back against Vladimir Putin's murderous assault, marking a historical moment when we all stood together on principle. Gee, this almost sounds like a news from the future type thing that I'll be reading a year from now once the war ends. Anyway,
News from the future, but from the past.
yes. The war has since been a failure for Moscow in multiple ways. Notably is the Russian military's complete incompetence, exposed by the skill, courage, and tenacity of a much smaller Ukrainian force that not only denied Putin a quick victory, but also demonstrated the ability of a determined people to beat back a larger foe, an important lesson for China against Taiwan. Eh? You see, you were talking about Taiwan earlier. The war has
I
stalemated.
believe it's called China.
China. The war has stalemated since since Ukraine's successful counteroffensive last fall. It cannot be allowed to harden into another frozen conflict. As such, we should pause on this gruesome anniversary to assess how best to facilitate victory for Kyiv and to send the right signals to Moscow and then Beijing. Western unity has Western unity has proven the most important factor in hampering Russia's war against and enabling Ukraine's. The US has done a good job keeping the allies together and moving forward. This has to be sustained. But what is lacking is a clear sense of how Washington wants this conflict to end and then resourcing that outcome. Regarding the former, we should follow the lead of Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, who said Russia must completely leave his country, including Crimea. That may be difficult for Moscow to accept, but we should not allow Putin's saber rattling to deter us. A year of his bluster has proven fears of escalation to be overblown. On the latter, while U.S. support has been strong, the Biden administration has been frustratingly late in providing Kyiv what it needs. Weapon systems like HIMARS, Patriots, and now Abrams tanks arrive long after Ukraine suffers needlessly. We seem to be doing just enough to prevent a Ukrainian loss, but not nearly enough to enable a Ukrainian victory. Zelensky has long asked for ATACMS. Now he's seeking modern fighter jets, critical to supporting a counteroffensive. But once again, Washington begins with, nah. Why not start training Ukrainians on F 16s now? Or assembling a volunteer cadre of former pilots and maintenance people, pending a final decision that is likely to be approved anyway? Ukraine can't afford to get pummeled for months waiting for aircraft, much like they are now desperate for tanks as a Russian offensive is slowly starting to begin. Other action should be taken to tighten the noose on Putin and signal our resolve, such as stiffening sanctions on Russia and those who aid them. Additionally, all our allies, not just a stalwart few, should contribute their fair share to the war effort. It's time for everyone to step up. Meanwhile, Turkish President Recep Erdogan has played domestic politics, demanding unreasonable concessions over NATO accession for Finland and Sweden, two democracies that would clearly enhance the alliance. Biden needs to turn up the heat on his dubious counterpart.
I
After
think they've
all,
got bigger issues right now.
maybe. Well, if you're talking domestically, yes, but geopolitically, no. This is the biggest thing on the plate.
Well,
Half
no. I meant Turkey. They've got bigger problems right now with the whole earthquake
earthquake,
situation.
yeah. The second one too.
Mm-hmm.
And the death toll climbed past 45,000 this week.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine what that must smell like? Like, this isn't like a joke about stinky people or anything. Decomp in a collapsed building is heinous because you can't make the smell stop, because you can't
Nope.
burn it, because there might still be somebody alive in there. It's just tragic. I've got a movie suggestion based on that. Try to remind me before the end of the show.
Soylent Green.
No, it's the there's two movies titled Stalingrad.
Ooh.
The one I'm referring to is the later of the two, the newer of the two, because Till Schweiger was in, or it was either that or Kretschmann. He was in the first one. That's not the one I'm talking about. It's the newer version of the movie with the same title. It talks about
Uh,
something like this:
okay.
earthquakes and buildings and people getting stuck and all this other stuff. Anyway, after all, we need a robust and ready NATO to not only empower Ukraine but to deter Russian misadventures elsewhere, while also dissuading China from acting against Taiwan. An alliance wide agreement to spend no less than 2% GDP on defense, something long advocated, would underscore our resolve. Time is not on Ukraine's side. Every passing day is another opportunity for Western support to weaken or fracture. Putin's counting on it. Moreover, before Russia can adapt to global sanctions and rebuild its forces, we must give Kyiv the means to win quickly and decisively. This makes many people uneasy, but Ukraine's future's on the line, and Beijing is taking notes. Importantly, the US must continue to lead. This means keeping the West unified and less self-deterred,
Right.
surging the defense industrial base for the global long haul, and providing continued assistance, all properly accounted for to Kyiv. Frequent messaging at home, framed uh, in the broader strategic context, is at hand. It's important to sustain public support and congressional funding. And finally, we should push similar support to Taiwan now, before Beijing acts.
Well,
This all comes at some expense, for sure, but deterring war is less costly than fighting one, and winning costs a lot less than losing. But defending freedom against autocracies like Russia and China that only respect acts of strength will keep us safer in the long run. History has taught us both lessons time and time again. Let's heed them and act.
well, speaking of Taiwan, we're gonna be talking about that soon, aren't we?
I believe so.
Because they are in the news and they are part of this.
Well, okay, so this was sort of an opinion piece. This wasn't me just speaking my opinion. I worked this off of the opinions of several, right?
No, I get that.
Kind of put it all together, kind of come to Jesus moment type of a thing,
Uh
right?
oh.
So, the way this was written, or the way I sort of tried to arrange this, was it seemed like we need to keep pushing because we're America and this is what we're good at and this is what we do. We stick our nose in everyone's business and we grab everyone by the collar and we drag the allies along across the finish line with us, right? That's just what we've done historically. It's not me trying to be some arrogant Western asshole. It's just,
That's the American way.
it's the American way. Thank you. It's like, that's the best way to describe it, right? If you want to do it a different way, to involve all UN and NATO allies, then the solution is simple. Give Zelensky and Ukraine what they want. And I'm not talking about weapons. Give them what they have been begging for since 2012. Make them a UN, NATO, whatever, member nation. I think it's UN, right? Put
Not
them in the
UN.
fucking UN. because then the next thing that Russia does will instantly be an Article 5 violation.
Ukraine's already in the UN. You mean NATO?
NATO.
because
Okay.
NATO.
I always get the two
Five.
kind of crisscrossed. So, yeah, okay. Put them in NATO. That's what they really want, right? If you put them in NATO, then the US doesn't have to do everything by itself. It's like, bam, welcome to NATO. Russia just fired on your country. Article 5 violation. Now we can put in a no-fly zone. Now we can occupy the country. Job done. War's over. You don't want to give fucking... If you don't want to give Ukraine F-16s, put them in NATO. Then put in the no-fly zone, and then we'll fly over it with F-22s. Then we don't have to give away F-16s. There you go. Job done. Or the Britons can fly Eurofighters or whatever they're using these days. Or the Swedes can fly Saabs. They still fly Saabs? Anyway, you get my point.
Yeah.
If you don't want us to foot the bill, if you don't want us to send our weapons and our tanks and our whatever, put them in NATO. Let it become an Article 5 violation overnight, and then all of NATO can get involved. That forces Putin's hand immediately. He has to make a decision at that point. Do you want the smoke of 30 countries on top of you? Probably not. I mean, he might be crazy, but he can be reasoned with. And he's got to see the wood for the trees. I can't beat 30 countries.
Actually, if you saw the UN vote today,
I did.
It may be more than 30 countries now.
32.
No, it's actually quite worse.
Well, either way.
And this goes into the discussion piece later.
Yes. Okay, so let's just keep going then, because
Yeah.
we're already 2 hours in, and
I mean, if you have to truncate anything,
we're
just
only
go ahead,
halfway
do it.
through. Well, I mean, I'm about to shotgun a bunch of them because they're quick ones. All right. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced Tuesday that Russia was pulling away from the New START treaty with the United States, which reduces and limits each country's nuclear arsenal. In this regard, I'm forced to announce today that Russia is suspending its participation in the Strategic Offensive Arms Treaty, Putin said in his annual address to the nation. That picture there.
Well, we know you don't have the money to maintain all of your nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but okay, this is going to get worse because you're about to find out. All right. In this regard, I'm forced to announce today that Russia is suspending its participation in the Strategic Offensive Arms Treaty, Putin said in his annual address to the nation, just one day after Biden made a surprise visit to Ukraine.
Oh, boo-hoo.
In his long-delayed State of the Union address, or State of the Nation address, rather, Putin cast Russia and Ukraine as victims of Western double dealing. He said Russia, not Ukraine, was the one fighting for its very existence. The speech reiterated a litany of grievances that the Russian leader had frequently offered as justifications for the widely condemned war and ignored international demands to pull back from occupied areas in Ukraine. The New START treaty, first signed in April 2010, limits the U.S. and Russia from having more than 1,550 nuclear warheads deployed on delivery systems like ICBMs, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or on heavy bombers. Both the U.S. and Russia are capable of deploying far more than the allotted nuclear warheads, as Washington and Moscow have an estimated combined total of more than 13,000 warheads, making up roughly 90% of the world's nuclear arsenal, according to the data provided by the Arms Control Association. Following the nuclear arms race that largely came to an end with the fall of the Soviet Union, the UN has pushed for nuclear disarmament, and global warhead inventories have dropped since hitting their peak in 1985, when more than 70,000 warheads were estimated to make up global stockpiles. Putin's speech comes 3 days before the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion. Russia has continued its attack on Ukraine over the last year, despite Western sanctions and losses on the battlefield. Ukraine's defense has been supported by a number of other countries, most of which are in the West. Ukrainian officials have said that they expected Russia to ramp up its offensive in Moscow's acknowledgement of the one-year anniversary on the 24th. Biden on Monday met with Ukrainian President Zelensky at Mariinsky Palace to announce an additional $500 million in U.S. assistance. The U.S. has already supported the Ukraine with tens of billions of dollars in financial aid and military equipment. Biden says he visited Ukraine to meet with Zelensky and reaffirm our unwavering and unflagging commitment to Ukraine's democracy, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. He said Putin was dead wrong in believing that Ukraine was weak. I'm meeting with Zelensky and his team for an extended discussion on our support, he says in a statement on Monday. I will announce another delivery of critical equipment, including artillery, ammunition, anti-armor systems, and air surveillance radars, to help protect the Ukrainian people from aerial bombardments. And I will share that later this week we will announce additional sanctions against elites and companies that are trying to evade or backfill Russia's war machine. That's all I got for that one. The next one's kind of funny, actually, because I saw this picture and I instantly thought of the title for this. Here you go. You're going to notice what isn't circled in that photo, and that's why I left the thing at the bottom. I call this story The Expendables. Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered a stark warning Tuesday that he would be suspending his nation's participation in a nuclear arms treaty, threatening to resume testing of nuclear weapons. Putin made a speech almost exactly a year after the invasion began, accusing the elites of the West of escalating international tensions. The elites of the West do not hide their purpose, but they also cannot fail to realize that it is impossible to defeat Russia on the battlefield, Putin says. The Russian president went on to announce that he would be pulling Russia out of the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, a bilateral agreement signed by former presidents Obama and Dmitry Medvedev.
You already hear about this?
Sort of. They're adding stuff onto it though.
It's the same. Move on.
Fine. Anyway, let's see. Damn it, now you got me thrown off. Oh, Putin claimed on Tuesday that in his Tuesday speech that the West was attempting to achieve a strategic defeat over Russia and take control of all of their nuclear capabilities? ? Of course, we will not do this first, but if the United States conducts tests, then we will too, Putin threatened. See, there's other bits in here. He continued, no one should have dangerous illusions that global strategic parity can be destroyed. A week ago, I signed a decree on putting new ground-based strategic systems on combat duty. Are they going to stick their nose in there too, or what? That's pretty defiant of him to say. Both the U.S. and Russia are capable of deploying far more than the allotted nuclear warheads. Okay, that part you already heard. There's a story coming in this line of stories about, yes, you think that they're reducing their numbers, but there's a lot more coming in terms of nukes. Moving on. This guy might be hard to see. He's the guy at the front on the table.
What?
In the picture that's about to load.
Oh.
Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul, traveled to Kyiv Tuesday with a congressional delegation to see firsthand what is happening on the ground in Ukraine and conduct oversight to gain better insight on the Russia-Ukraine war. McCaul, of Texas, of course, was joined on the trip by Representatives Darrell Issa of California, Keith Self, another of Texas, Max Miller of Ohio, and Jake Ellazey, again of Texas. Boy, we're representing, aren't we?
Oh.
Earlier Tuesday, the lawmakers were in Bucha, meeting with the Ukrainian Prosecutor General, Andriy Kostin. They also met with Ukrainian President Zelensky before conducting a press conference in Kyiv. A Foreign Affairs Committee aide was quoted as saying that the delegation traveled to Ukraine to see firsthand what is occurring on the ground in the war zone. The trip was designed to prioritize oversight, and the lawmakers plan to be transparent about their findings at the meetings.
Look at those vehicles in the background.
I know, right? Like, I kind of want all of them.
Me too.
I'll just take an MRAP from Afghanistan, though.
Taliban beat you
I'm
to it.
still bitter. A Foreign Affairs Committee aide was quoted as saying that the delegation traveled. I already said that part, didn't I? Yeah. The lawmakers also held a meeting focused on Russian war crimes and plan to hold a hearing in the spring on that issue. The GOP trip comes just a day after President Biden made his surprise visit to the capital city ahead of the 1-year mark. McCall says that Biden's surprise photo op Monday is not enough and said that the U.S. needs to send more lethal aid. That's all the same stuff too, isn't it? I'm rehashing that. Okay. So, the top Republican of the Senate committee, Jim Risch of Idaho, also agreed that more lethal force is needed and called on Biden to start sending fourth-generation fighter aircraft. So, yeah, Mike, you're right. There's a bit of overlap because I find these in chronological order. But
I hate to harp on you about it, but you know
it's
we
okay.
Cut a lot of that fat out.
I'm working on it. All right, so we're on the next one already. And that looks more like a stage than a... Anyway. All right. President Biden on Tuesday challenged Russian President Vladimir Putin to, quote, end the war against Ukraine and warned that the U.S. and its allies around the world will continue to support Ukraine and push for another round of sanctions on the Kremlin. Biden delivered that warning from Warsaw, Poland, nearly a year after Russia's invasion.
Exactly. Warsaw, Poland, not Patriot.
Yes. That's kind of why I did the long pause. 1 year ago, the world was bracing for the fall of Kyiv, Biden says. Well, I just came from Kyiv, and I can report that Kyiv is still standing. Kyiv stands proud. It stands tall. And most importantly, it stands free. Biden said that a year after Putin's invasion, NATO is more united and more unified than ever before. Putin is confronted with something today that he didn't think was even possible a year ago. The democracies around the world have actually grown stronger, not weaker. But the autocrats around the world have grown weaker, not stronger. I don't believe that either. I'm glad you said that.
I don't believe that last part, the autocrats are weaker, but I do believe the part where NATO is standing strong. I believe that part because as we've seen, you know, Poland is chomping at the bits. They want to fight the Russians. They want to spill Russian blood. Okay.
Yes.
There's no denying that.
Yes.
And as I said earlier, even some of those very quiet Soviet satellite states in Northern Europe, you know, have started saying anti-Russian things. And they've been silent for like 30 something odd years since the collapse. Some of them have joined NATO and they've been part of NATO for a good, 20 years?
Yeah, at least
20, 30 years, but they haven't said anything. And the fact that they're starting to remove statues and start speaking out against Russia, that says something. That means
they're emboldened by the alliance. They're like, oh wow, we made it to the boys club.
So it's like, these guys are ballers. We're part of the ballers now.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So, 1 year into this war, Putin no longer doubts the strength of our coalition, but he still doubts our conviction. He doubts our staying power. He doubts our continued support for Ukraine. He doubts that they can remain unified. But there should be no doubt that our support for Ukraine will not waver. NATO will not be divided, and we will not tire. Citing remarks Putin made early Tuesday, Biden said the United States and Europe do not seek to control or destroy Russia. The West is not even planning to attack Russia, as Putin said today. This war was never a necessity. It's a tragedy. I wonder who wrote that for him, because that's actually brilliant.
Well,
Biden,
keep going.
That's like the most clever thing he said all week.
Biden
know, says Putin, quote, chose this war. Every day the war continues, is his choice. He could end it with a word, Biden says. It's simple. If Russia stopped invading Ukraine, it would end the war. Biden said that the United States and a worldwide coalition, oh, you were right, of more than 50 nations. So yeah,
Mm.
you were definitely right.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
the current UN vote today,
Mhm.
it's more than 50 now.
Well,
But
yeah, because at the
50,
UN, it's like 170 something nations, right?
it's about 141 right now.
Okay. You mean
Which
pro or just total?
141 are against Russia.
Got it. Okay.
There's a couple. There's more than a couple that have abstained. I'll give you that.
Iran,
Well,
Venezuela,
they're
Cuba.
they're for Russia.
Well, oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. South Africa probably abstained. I have a story about South Africa.
We can talk about the whole UN thing later.
Yeah. All right.
But
So, where am I at? Biden also touted the sanctions placed on Russia by his administration and allied nations. Together, we made sure Russia is paying the price for its abuses. We continue to maintain the largest sanction regime ever imposed on any country in history. And we're going to announce more sanctions this week together with our partners to hold accountable those who are responsible for this war. Slight sidebar, your sanctions didn't do shit because one of those guys at that military arms expo in the UAE was a sanctioned dude and he was there. So, goes to show how good sanctions are. It's almost like gun control. You can write it down, but if nobody follows it, it's worthless.
Well, that's how Democrats are. Let's just put
feel-goodisms.
Stupid laws and stupid sanctions and hope everything works out for the better.
Feel-goodisms.
Jack shit.
To borrow something from Rush Limbaugh, who's been dead for 2 years now, by the way.
I miss Rush.
I do too. I miss his voice. They will seek justice for war crimes and crimes against humanity that continue to be committed by the Russians, he says. Biden reflected on the extraordinary brutality committed by Russian forces in Ukraine without shame or compunction. They've targeted civilians with death, destruction, used rape as a weapon of war, stolen Ukrainian children, and attempt to steal Ukraine's future from train stations, maternity hospitals, schools, orphanages, Biden says. No one can turn away their eyes from the atrocities Russia's committing against the Ukrainian people. It's abhorrent. But Biden also said, 1 year after the bombs began to fall and Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, Ukraine is still independent and free. He is right about that. We lost a Bjorn.
Yes, the Bjorn.
Okay, moving on.
Bjorn.
Yes. I just jokingly put the umlauts. All right. So, we are on the bottom half now. China's top diplomat is traveling in Russia on a diplomatic mission that will touch on the country's roles in propagating, quote, world peace. Wang Yi, the director of China's office of the Central Foreign Affairs Commission, landed in Moscow on Tuesday for the first diplomatic meeting between the two allied countries since the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesman Wang Yanbin commented on the trip Tuesday as Yi was en route to Russia, describing the visit announced last week as an opportunity for discussion on the two countries' roles in promoting world peace. Last week, we announced that member of the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee and director of the Office of the Central Commission for Foreign Affairs, Wang Yi, would visit Russia, said Wen Bin. He continued, China would like to take the opportunity of this visit to work with Russia to promote the steady growth of the bilateral relations in the direction identified by our presidents, safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of both sides, and play a positive role for world peace. We will release relevant information in a timely manner. I'm sorry, but that whole paragraph was word salad. It really was. Anyway, he is set to meet with Russian President Minister Sergei Lapdog during the trip. But whether... Oh, I say Lapdog. It's not his real name. It's Lavrov.
Yeah, I know.
But whether there will be an audience with President Putin is unknown. Vice President Nepads announced last week that the United States has officially determined, yes, I said that, determined the Russian military is committing crimes against humanity in its invasion of Ukraine. Most of that is the same stuff I already read to you about how she was a lawyer and engaged in horrendous atrocities and war crimes, gruesome acts of murder, torture, rape, and deportation, executions, killings, beatings, and electrocution. Russian authorities have forcibly deported hundreds of thousands of people from Russia or from Ukraine to Russia, including their children. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Yi at the Munich conference amid tensions between the two countries over Chinese surveillance objects that were shot down over the United States. We've already gone over this too. Secretary spoke to the unacceptable violation of U.S. sovereignty and international law by the People's Republic of China high-altitude surveillance balloons in the United States territorial airspace, underscoring that this irresponsible act can and will never and should never occur. Basically saying, fly that shit over again and see what happens. Moving on.
Moving on.
Now we're going in. There's a lot of China stories coming up, by the way. I'm just preparing you for this.
China.
Speaking of, China dismissed criticism from the U.S. about its apparent support for Russia in the invasion of Ukraine Tuesday, according to the U.S., or accusing the U.S. of fanning the flames of conflict in the region. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang
Only on
Wen.
Tuesday?
Yeah,
But today's Friday.
I know, we're getting there.
Oh my god.
A couple of days were big.
Oh my god.
I know. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin. Actually, you know what? I mean, I did it in the intro. This was the first time in forever that I got shotgunned with so many stories. It was almost like everyone was waiting for this day to release them. Okay, I'll keep an eye out for him. Just tell him to hop in the green room and I'll pull him back in. Where did I leave off? Okay, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin attempted to turn the tables in the U.S. during a Tuesday press briefing after the U.S. accused China of potentially providing lethal aid. Wang said that the U.S. defense industry is profiteering from the conflict and compared the situation to the war in Afghanistan. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken recently said that China knows that there would be consequences where China were to provide lethal assistance to Russia, but he refused to lay out what the consequences would be if China ignored the warning.
Oh,
Well, what's
no.
your comment? The reporter asked. The U.S. is the biggest source of weaponry for the battlefield in Ukraine, Wang responded. We do not accept the U.S.'s finger pointing or coercion targeting China-Russia relationships. So this part, I think I covered in a previous story. Basically what they're doing is they're just pointing the finger back going, sticks and stones, you can't tell us what to do when you're doing the exact same thing for the other side. That's what they're calling us out.
Actually, since it's China, it would be chopsticks and stones.
Okay. Anyway.
Come on.
Okay, I
good.
had my dad jokes earlier. I see where this is going. It's cool. We all saw what the U.S. did in Afghanistan with its strategy of, quote, fighting to the last Afghan.
Okay, that was Biden. That was Biden, okay?
What?
We could have won Afghanistan if we'd done it right, but we
Yeah.
had Commander Captain Sundown in charge.
Yeah, but we were there for over 20 years.
I know.
All right.
We also
And they
had
left my
Obama.
MRAP behind.
We also had Obama too, and he didn't help either.
No. We did get 3.5 trillion tons of iron ore, though.
It's not
That's
enough.
the quiet part that was spoken out loud by us throughout the year. Anyway, President Biden on Tuesday challenged Russian President Putin to, quote, end the war against Ukraine and warned that we will continue to push for new sanctions. The broadsides from the U.S. and China come as Russia's invasion nears its 1-year mark. Putin himself withdrew Russia from the New START treaty with the U.S. on Tuesday. The New START treaty that's just a rehash of what the New START treaty is. Biden, speaking in Poland on Tuesday, reiterated that the U.S. and Europe do not seek control or to destroy Russia, and the West never had a plan to attack them. as Putin insists that we said. This war was never a necessity, it is a global tragedy. I've already covered that part too. Anyway, I don't know why they keep doing that. It's like, you can just build off the original story. You don't have to keep rehashing it on top. Let's move on, because now we're definitely on the bottom half. So we're going to go to what you wanted to talk to slightly. Taiwan.
Taiwan.
Surprised?
Russian components, American components, all made in Taiwan.
Oh, it gets better. Wednesday. Finally made it. February 22nd, day 364. On Wednesday, the Chinese Foreign Office sharply criticized the United States. It's China again fucking with us, right? After a senior Defense Department official visited Taiwan. China's Taiwan Affairs Office spokesperson Zhu Fenglian accused the U.S. and Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party of attempting to push the island's independence from China and discouraged the alleged efforts. China resolutely opposes any official interaction and military collaboration between the two countries, Zhu said Wednesday, further underscoring tensions between Beijing and Washington, D.C. over Taiwan. Real quick side note here. If everybody in China is trying to talk about this, quote, one China policy, then why would your spokesperson say between the two countries? Because that would mean that you also identify Taiwan as its own country. You done fucked up, son.
It means you already recognize them as a country. And if that's the case, you screwed yourself.
Exactly. Way to go. I think Zhu Fenglian is about to be, I don't know, mining lithium, wearing his wife's head as a hat after we just pointed that out.
He's going to be hanging out with his good buddy, the guy who stood in front of the tanks. So he's gonna start saying tanks a lot.
Oh boy. Thank you very much. All right, so where am I at? The comment comes after Michael Chase, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for China, visited Taiwan amid Chinese military movements in the Pacific Ocean and the East China Sea. Zhu also reaffirmed the Chinese government's sanction on Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, both U.S.-located companies that supply military equipment to the self-governing island. Officially, the U.S. and most of the international community observe the one China policy that says China has sovereignty over Taiwan, though the island self-governs. The spokesperson also told reporters such alleged cooperation between Taiwan and the U.S. to push for the island's independence is doomed to failure. China said that it will maintain its control over Taiwan by force if necessary, often using its military and diplomatic efforts to exercise control. The sides split amid a civil war back in 1949. If I remember right, you told me this. At the end of World War II, China had like a political civil war.
Yes.
The Communist Party took over the mainland. The original people who didn't want the communism went to Taiwan.
The original government. Okay, so, remember they used to be led by an emperor, okay?
Yes.
Emperor died.
Yes.
Okay. They had a provisional government which was nationalist in a sense, but
Yes.
it was democratically led. So basically that party was ruling. And then the communists aided by Russia decided, you know what, we don't really want to be democratically elected anymore. So let's just go and, take them out and become a communist nation.
Right.
And they pushed that government all the way to Taiwan.
So
And
it was like the Reds
where they
versus the
split.
Whites during the Bolshevik Revolution.
So when I talk about the government of Taiwan, that's the original Chinese government, or what's
The one
what's
we
left of
liked.
it.
The ones
The
we
one
liked.
we liked. the one we backed. Because I'm telling you right now, we didn't back Mao Zedong at
No.
all.
No. God, no. It's hard to back a person who never brushes his teeth. And when he did, he dipped reeds in green tea. That's a
So
fact. It's a
so
fact.
the current while the people have died and people have changed, but the actual
Mhm.
government of Taiwan is
The
the remnant.
governmental style is
It,
still the way it
it's
used
it,
to be.
it's the remnants of the original Chinese government before the
Okay.
communists took over.
Yeah. See, I thought I heard it from you, so it was better to let you just explain it.
And and people argue with me all you want, but look at the flag of China before the communists took over, and look at the flag of Taiwan. It's the same damn flag.
It's close. It is
It's
kind of
been
close,
changed. It's been changed over the years for the current Taiwan
but the
because
symbol is the same.
the symbols are the same.
Yes, agreed.
So
Okay, so now I got to see where I left off. Oh, the Pentagon did not comment directly on Chase's visit, but repeated its commitment to Taiwan is rock solid and contributes to the maintenance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait within the region, the AP reports. Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs also did not address the visit. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wei, sorry, it's Wang or Wang? I'm just gonna say Wang because it's spelled that way. Wang Wenbin, and I know it's probably Wang, but whatever. Similarly accused the U.S. of coordinating a push for independence and said that a new round of tensions in the Taiwan Strait was the result of such attempts to seek independence with U.S. support, as well as the U.S. intention to contain China with Taiwan. We urge the U.S. to stop any form of official U.S. Taiwan contacts, stop meddling in the Taiwan issue, and stop creating new factors of tension in the Taiwan Straits. That sounds like a threat. Tensions between the U.S. and China remain unsteady as Washington accused Beijing of using a balloon that carried surveillance capabilities that soared over most of the continental U.S. before it was shot down off the coast of South Carolina. Maybe they just wanted the balloon to go see that really cute assistant DA in that trial in your state.
by
Anyway,
the way,
yes.
did you mention while
Yeah, I
they
said
did
she
shoot
was
the
cute.
balloon down? Did you see that post I posted in War Never Changes? Right before or right after they did that, because they left one of those hover ships unattended on Myrtle Beach.
Oops.
You know the ones I'm talking about that hover over the ground, over
Yes.
the. They left one of those unattended on the beach.
That's just asking for a ghost ride.
I know. I
So
know.
where were you? No, I know you're not that close to the coast.
I'm not. No, I'm not that close to Myrtle Beach.
Mm.
Otherwise, I'm like, all right, hell yeah, we're going joyriding, my man.
Look at me. Look at me. This is my hovercraft now.
I
Yeah,
am the hovercraft now.
this is my hovercraft now.
Yeah, but
All right, all right. Let's see. Is there anything left in the story that doesn't look like rehash? Immediately following the spy balloon controversy, Secretary of State Antony Blinken canceled his trip to Beijing, and the U.S. continues to criticize communications between China and Russia over the latter's invasion of Ukraine. China, in response, said it has no limits in its friendship with Russia and instead blames the US and NATO for provoking the Kremlin. The US is the biggest source of weaponry for the battlefield in Ukraine, Wang says during the briefing. We do not accept the US's finger pointing or even coercion targeting China and Russia relations. The US should seriously reflect on what it has done and stop fanning the flames or profiteering from it, and stay truly committed to promoting peace talks as China has continued and will continue to do. So full of shit, man. A delegation of U.S. lawmakers, including Ro Khanna of California, Tony Gonzalez of Texas, Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts, Auchincloss? Okay. Jonathan Jackson of Illinois. So let me break down that by party. 1, 2, 3. 3 Democrats and 1 Republican They all got together and they visited Taiwan as part of a 5-day visit. They're in that photo right there that you're looking at.
Right now.
On Monday, right meow. On Monday, the delegation met with the head of the legislature, and the following day they met with President Tsai Ing-wen and other officials. The congressional team also met with Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company's founder, Morris Chang, considered the father of the island's world's leading microchip industry that is now investing heavily in U.S. production. What he didn't tell you is because the United States provides all of the tooling needed for the microchip production industry that resides in Eastern Asia. Isn't that weird? We're trying to get chips from countries that we sold them the tooling for to make said chips. And yet,
So we don't make them anymore.
we don't make them anymore. We just make the tooling. It's like, we could be making them if you didn't want to outsource for cheap labor. But no, you just keep building China into the unstoppable rich trillionaire dollar monster. Because that's what they're doing. And we're doing it with Taiwan because, hey, it's cheap labor and an ally. That's kind of the way it's looking like that to me. But moving on, because we are accelerating towards the end, which is great. And this one's called Spy Ship. And I have secured a photo of said spy ship legitimately, and it's got the breakdown of what it looks like what the features of this ship are. So you can look at that photo if you have to pause it because it's not a very long story and you want to see all the stuff that's on it. This came from Naval News.
Is this a picture of the balloon?
No, this is a legitimate picture of the spy ship in question. Like this is not a joke. I'm not joking. This came from Naval News. They're like, I have it on good authority.
That's about our car's extended warranty.
Right, but I have on good authority that this is legit. The source was legit. So, anyway, Belgium says it's investigating the presence of a Russian spy ship. That one in the North Sea, amid concerns that it would come, quote, suspiciously close to our wind farms, undersea gas lines, data cables, and other critical infrastructure. Vincent van Quickenborn, Belgium's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Justice in the North Sea, made the announcement after the Netherlands said Monday it detected a Russian ship trying to gain intelligence. That just sounds funny. I just want to stop right there. Trying to gain intelligence. To sabotage energy infrastructure at an offshore wind farm in the Dutch part of the North Sea, according to Reuters. We don't know the exact motives of this ship, but let's not be naive, Van Quickenborn was quoted as saying, describing the vessel found in Belgium's North Sea as a spy ship. Especially if it behaves suspiciously close to our wind farms, undersea gas and data cables, and other critical infrastructure. Even though the Russian ship was originally spotted in November, it has turned off its AIS tracking beacon. Now, just a real quick sidebar here. Do you remember me talking about they were looking for the source of what destroyed the Nord Stream 1 pipeline? The one that I kept showing you all the pictures of, like, the bubbles coming up out of the ocean? This is the boat. This one. Because they were able to look at the path of all the ships in the area, and they were able to narrow it down by size and tonnage that only 4 ships crossed that area on that day to make that pipeline burst. And out of the 4 ships, this one is the only one that turned its tracking beacon off for a couple of hours. Why would you do that unless you were trying to hide your position from everyone else? Spy ship. Now, we have a friend in cohort that is a retired Marine, and he is trying to relocate the source of the story he found. He said he read it a while back because I think 2 months ago they had concluded their investigation of who actually blew Nord Stream 1. And the answer that this former Marine shared with me was quite shocking because it's not what I expected. And I'm not going to say it out loud yet because he's going to try to find the source and bring it back to me. Because if we can verify it, things are going to change a lot for the worst. But anyway, that's the boat in question right there. That's all of its features. It has been reacquired in the area. So, the passage of this vessel should doubtlessly be seen in the broader context of the war in Ukraine. Earlier this week, the Dutch Military Intelligence and Security Service, MIVD, MIVD? Sorry, that just sounds terrible. Said a Russian ship tried to gain more information about its energy infrastructure in the North Sea, but it was escorted away from the area by Dutch Marine and Coast Guard vessels. We saw in recent months Russian actors tried to uncover how the energy system works in the North Sea. It is the first time we have seen this. This came from MIVD's Director Major General Jan Swillens. Russia is mapping how our wind farms are parked in the North Sea and how they function. They're very interested on how they could sabotage them. That's a pretty big accusation. But then again, every time this ship is seen, something happens. Stands to reason, spy ship. Moving on. Alright, so this is called The Vow. President Biden addressed the group of European nations known as the Bucharest Nine, or the B9, on Wednesday, stressing the need to stand up to Russian aggression and emphasize the United States' commitment to its NATO allies. The president's appearance at the B9 meeting in Warsaw came as part of a European tour that saw the president stop in Ukraine and meet with President Zelensky before heading off to Poland. The trip is taking place nearly 1 year to the day after Russia invaded Ukraine, kicking off a war that continues to rage on. As NATO's eastern flank, you're our front lines and our collective defense, and you know better than anyone else what's at stake in this conflict. Biden said this to officials from the B9 countries of Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Estonia, you were asking about this, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, and Slovakia. While pointing out the other nations' role in fending off of a Russian threat, Biden made it perfectly clear that the U.S. will be there with them if any NATO member is attacked. The commitment of the United States to NATO, as I've said it to you many times, and I will say it again, is absolutely clear. Article 5 is a sacred commitment that the United States has made. We will defend, literally, every inch of NATO. And then you know what? World leaders are starting to do this a lot. They repeat the last 4 words of their last sentence, every inch of NATO. Article 5 of the NATO Treaty says that an armed attack against one or more member countries shall be considered an attack against them all, and that each member will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking forthwith such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic area. Biden said that with Russia continuing its offensive, what literally is at stake is not just Ukraine, it's freedom in general. Following Biden's remarks, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg claimed that Russia's President Vladimir Putin is showing no signs of slowing down or seeking peace, but it's preparing for world war. Look at that! He finally said it. So we must sustain and step up our support for Ukraine, Stoltenberg continues. We must give Ukraine what they need to prevail. We do not know when the war will end, but when it does, we need to ensure that history will never repeat itself again. That's an arrogant goal. Pretty sure they said that at the end of the First World War. I bet they said it again at the end of the second one. Now here we are at the opening stages of the third one. Imagine that. Moving on. This one was pretty good. The International Federation of Journalists have suspended with immediate effect the Russian Union of Journalists over its action since Russia's invasion of Ukraine and its role in annexed Ukrainian territories. The IFJ, which represents more than 600,000 media workers across the world, said that the Russian Union's membership was suspended following an investigation, then a vote by its Global Executive Committee on Wednesday. The vote was held after the Union refused to reconsider its decision to set up branches in 4 regions annexed by Russia. The Russian Union of Journalists' actions in establishing 4 branches in the annexed Ukrainian territories have clearly shattered solidarity and sown divisions among sister unions, said IFJ President Dominique Padrali. The Kremlin in September illegally annexed Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia regions, where it claims its rule was welcomed. Pro-Moscow separatists have controlled part of Donetsk and neighboring Luhansk province since 2014. The IFJ said it will continue to support independent journalists inside and outside Russia while providing aid to its Ukrainian affiliates. According to the Federation, Ukraine was the deadliest country for journalists in 2022, with 12 media workers killed while doing their work. Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
The Russian Navy. Oh, this is where I get to bring South Africa into the fold.
Are the Russian Navy still around?
Yes. As you're about to see. The Russian military denied Wednesday that it was planning to test its new Zircon hypersonic missiles during naval drills off the coast of South Africa this week. That will coincide with the 1-year anniversary of the invasion in Ukraine. China's Navy also is participating in the Indian Ocean exercises, which come at a time when Russia's relationship with the West is at its lowest point since the Cold War. The ties between China and the United States are in serious strain. As Russian and Chinese warships prepared in South Africa for their joint drills, Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted China's most senior foreign policy official at the Kremlin. Those meetings showed the strengthening of Russia's relationship with China and raised concern in the West that Beijing might be ready to offer Moscow stronger support for its war in Ukraine. Russia's aims for the naval exercises came under scrutiny because of the involvement of the Admiral Gorshkov, a frigate which is armed with hypersonic missiles and has served as the main testbed for them. The ship arrived in Cape Town last week, emblazoned with the letters Z and V. Letters also seen on Russian weapons on the front lines of Ukraine, and which are used as patriotic symbols in Russia. Russia has said Zircon missiles can penetrate any missile defense systems by flying at an astounding 7,000 miles per hour, or Mach 9, to strike targets at sea and on land. They have a range of over 620 miles, Russia claims. Well, if it does 7,000 miles per hour, and it has a range of 620 miles, that means the booster engine on that thing is only good for, 9 seconds? At full speed? That's, not efficient. Anyway. Putin sent the Admiral Gorshkov on a trans-ocean cruise last month in a show of force as tensions with the West escalated over Ukraine. But a Russian Navy officer in South Africa said Wednesday that the exercises would focus on maritime security, including the fight against piracy, and the zircons would not be fired. The drills will involve mutual maneuvering of the three sides, assistance of the suffering vessel in a disaster, liberation of a captured vessel by pirates, and artillery fire, which, according to our schedule, does not include the firing with the hypersonic missiles. This came from Captain Oleg Gladky, who spoke through a translator. The Admiral Gorshkov and a Russian oil tanker for refueling, a Chinese destroyer, frigate, and a support vessel, and a South African frigate will be involved in the exercises, according to a South African military statement addressed earlier last week. Ukraine's ambassador to South Africa, Lyubov Abravitova. Wow, Abravitova. Okay, so his name is Lyubov Abravitova. Criticized. I think Farida could probably tell me how screwed up I did that. Criticized the timing of the drills, which will overlap with Friday's 1-year anniversary for the start of the war in Ukraine. Abravitova noted that China, Russia, and South Africa, which are partners in the BRICS bloc of emerging economies, have undertaken joint naval drills before it said it is a concern for us that they are happening at the time of the anniversary of a brutal Russian invasion. The vessel that came to the shores of South Africa basically brought a piece of the war to this peaceful land, though having the letters Z and V, which they are using as a marking on their military equipment while bombing Ukrainian cities, Abravitova said in an interview with the AP. Last week, a small yacht flying Ukraine's flag sailed by the Admiral Gorshkov in Cape Town's harbor in protest. On Wednesday, a group of protesters gathered outside the Russian embassy in the South African capital, Pretoria. They criticized the presence of a Russian warship and South Africa's decision to host it. One protester held up a placard that said, "Don't play with bullies." South Africa is a key partner of the West in Africa and has come under criticism for holding several of the naval exercises, but has defended itself by saying that they were planned over 2 years ago, well before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The exercises are to be held around the Indian Ocean port cities of Durban and Richards Bay. Media access has been completely restricted. Now, I don't think I got the story for this, but there was a companion piece to the story I just read you, and it was another one of those I told you so's. Do you remember a long time ago now, I was talking about how China would come into countries of strategic importance to them, like, for instance, Ethiopia and Somalia on the east coast of Africa, and they were like, "Hey, bro, we love your country. We would like to bring you into the 21st century as an emerging power. How about you let us Chinese come into your country and we will build roads and infrastructure and railways to really bolster your nation?" And the leadership of Somalia was like, "What's in it for you?" And they were like, "We're just trying to be good neighbors. We're on the other side of the Indian Ocean. We thought we could work together." And they were like, "That would be great, but what do you get out of this?" And China was like, "Tell you what, we have to build a dock to bring all the materials here." And they're like, "Okay." And they said, "And it's on a piece of land that you're not even using." "Okay. How about you let us build a dock here? We'll bring all the materials and we'll start building all your roadways and maybe some buildings and some infrastructure. And you just give us a lease on this property that this dock is at for, let's say, I don't know, 25 years. And we'll even deal you a solid. We'll install some naval vessels there to help protect your coast. So you get free protection too." And Somalia was probably like, Yeah, okay, it sounds great. We don't have to pay you, right? We're broke. And China's like, no, it's cool, bro. We gotcha. We're just trying to help you out. They agreed to it. They have roads. Many roads are built in the southern half of Africa now, thanks to Chinese companies doing it. But it's not about the roads. It was about the dock. They had a naval foothold on the eastern side of Africa now. And they also had one, I want to say somewhere in the vicinity of India. So the companion piece that I read today was China already controls the entire Indian Ocean because of those strategic ports. And I thought, well, okay, but how does that affect us on our side of the pond? Well, they also did the same trick to, I think it was Argentina, or maybe it was Chile. They did the same thing. They built roads, and they have a base there. And you've heard us talk about this.
Well, you also have to figure in the reef islands that they've turned into actual islands,
Hmm.
in the South China Sea,
Correct. But I mean, I guess what I'm
which,
getting at is,
which aren't even their territorial waters because technically they belong to Vietnam and some of the other countries down there.
yeah. But my whole point is they're building a naval presence in the under the guise of, well, we're just building your infrastructure, and we're gonna keep the port that we use to bring all this in, and we just thought we'd leave a couple of naval vessels there for your protection. See what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And so, imagine if they do have one off the coast of Chile, right? It's really hard to monitor shipping across the Pacific Ocean. First of all, because of how vast it is. Second of all, because there's huge expanses without any islands. So they can disappear by just going out in the middle of the no man's land of the Pacific, right? Think of how many troops and bullets and guns and bombs and munitions they could have brought to Chile and then start their invasion going up the coast.
Mm,
It's far fetched, but we talked about this before. And all of a
okay,
sudden now, they're doing missile drill tests with the Russians in South Africa? You see what I'm saying? Like,
I
that
get
was
what you're
something that was
saying.
unheard of before.
I get what you're saying, but you realize how much of a folly trying to attack the United States homeland would be.
Well, yes and no. See, the thing is I'm going to fall back on something that I used to tell Patrick all the time is don't let your patriotism blind you and underestimate your enemy. Because bless his heart, he is one of the most patriotic people I know. It's just he's patriotic to a fault. And it's okay to love your country. And it's okay to think that there's nothing better than yours. But you can never underestimate what you don't know either. Like, we don't know what they're capable of right now. We do know, yes, they have the loudest boats in the Navy, in the Navy's oceans, the Chinese. So it's like we'll hear them coming. But that's not that's not the one thing that's going to give them a certain defeat. They still have an air contingent. They can still paratroop people in if they had to. They can turn off their transponders. I mean,
Hmm,
the Russians did it, right? So
right.
I'm just saying, can we beat them? I'd like to think so. But there's a little voice in the back of my head saying, never become complacent by underestimating your adversary. Because that's when they get you. I mean, that's what they did to us in Pearl Harbor. Nobody expected the Japanese to be able to do that. First of all, they didn't think they had the capability or the intelligence at the time. Engineering intelligence, I should say. And as soon as they became complacent, boom, 3,600 people died, right? in a single day, and almost the
Mhm.
entire naval battleship and heavy cruiser fleet at anchor was destroyed. Thank God the carriers weren't there. Yeah, it was dangerous because of underestimation. Anyway, moving on. This is called Ned. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price on Wednesday warned that there would be consequences if China were to provide lethal aid to Russia in its war against Ukraine. But when pressed on just what those consequences might be, he
They
was
flip flop.
he was more ambiguous. Wednesday's comments came after Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who met with China's top diplomat, Wang Yi, in Munich over the weekend, said that the U.S. has evidence China is considering lethal support to Russia. Price clarified that the U.S. has not seen concrete evidence of direct support, but added, we don't believe they've taken it off the table either. Which means, yeah, they know they're doing it. They're just not making it public that they know that they're not doing it. Price said that China's providing of lethal weapons to Russia for use in Ukraine would cause real consequences in our bilateral relationship, as if they cared what we think. The PRC understands what's at risk were it to proceed with providing material support to Russia's war against Ukraine, he says. We've been clear, and we will not hesitate to target Chinese companies or individuals that violate our sanctions, and we're monitoring very vigilantly for potential violations. Price predicted that China would suffer reputational costs if it were to follow through with providing Russia with lethal aid. Already it is providing diplomatic support. It is providing economic support. It is spewing propaganda that serves to amplify the lies, the distortions, the myths, the half-truths that they're emanating from Moscow, he says. That escalated quickly, didn't it? Later in the press conference, a reporter questioned what possible leverage the U.S. has as a deterrent if China sides with Russia. Price said that there was, quote, an advantage to some degree of ambiguity. We have been clear with the PRC about the fact that the consequences would befall them if they were to provide lethal assistance, but we think it's most effective if we leave that ambiguous and we continue to warn consistently of those consequences, Price said. Sidebar. That statement is hollow and weightless because we're leaving things ambiguous with a guy like the current president in charge, who is ambiguous because he's weak and clueless. He's not giving you an answer because he doesn't have an answer. And this guy just did the exact same thing. Oh, we think it's most effective if we leave it ambiguous and continue to warn don't do these things because, or else what? Or else. That's what he's doing, basically. Experts have argued that the Biden administration might have forced China's hand after revealing its suspicions that China was considering providing Russia with lethal aid.
Mhm.
The U.S. and its NATO allies have repeatedly warned that any nation, including China, will see severe economic sanctions if they are found aiding Russia's war against Ukraine. China has toed the line when it comes to the war in Ukraine, refusing to condemn Russia's invasion, but also, so far, failing to provide arms to its chief international partner. It's because Russia would just take them and sell them in Abu Dhabi. I mean, that was what, 6 or 7 stories ago? We've already established this. All right, moving on. Thursday. Hey, see, we got there. Day 365.
Ugh.
The day before the 1-year mark, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so this is called win or lose. Not hit or miss, it's called win or lose. And the two people in that picture is lose and lose even harder. 1 year after Russia commenced its armed invasion of Ukraine, experts laid out Moscow's costly adventure will leave pretty much every nation worse off compared to before when it started, even if they weren't directly involved. I would say that no one comes out the winner here, says Craig Singleton from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Ukraine will have been devastated, and it will require billions of dollars in reconstruction money that the Western world, including the United States, will largely be responsible for providing. Russia, however, the scenarios unfolds here, is likely severely weakened, still under massive international sanctions. It's difficult for me to see a scenario where there are any winners here, he says. Russian President Vladimir Putin declared the start of a special military operation to denazify Ukraine on February 24th of last year, deploying troops across Ukraine's eastern border while also sending troops to take control of the capital city of Kyiv. Putin reportedly believed that the entire operation would only take a few days, and Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley said or echoed that sentiment as one of 5 possible outcomes if Russia launched an invasion of Ukraine, saying that Kyiv could fall in as little as 72 hours. Slight sidebar here. If you get it that wrong, how come you weren't forced to resign for being an idiot? Just a thought, right? Yeah. In early February 22, Chairman Milley now, and several other officials briefed lawmakers during a classified briefing on the pending Russian invasion. Colonel David Butler, spokesman for Chairman Milley, was quoted as saying, "In the briefing, Chairman Milley laid out several scenarios informed by intra-agency intelligence assessments, and on the far end of a range of possibilities was that the Russians would take Kyiv in several days. This is what we assessed that the Russians had planned to do." The intelligence about Russia's capabilities ultimately proved egregiously wrong as Ukraine dug in its heels and maintained a staunch defense, supported by NATO and Western allies who supplied the country with weapons and supplies to wage an asymmetric war that has helped it reach the 1-year mark unbeaten. That defense has come at significant costs, which Russia's expert Rebecca Koffler, first time I mentioned her this week, highlighted as a major concern moving forward, regardless of the conflict's outcome. Putin and Russia are clear losers. Koffler, president of the Doctrine and Strategy Consulting and former DIA intelligence officer, was quoted as saying, "Putin committed basically demographic suicide. Estimates are that Russia has lost about 200,000 personnel, either to death or injury, and he's additionally mobilizing 1.5 million troops, preparing for a protracted war. On top of that, Russia's been a pariah in the West. They're not welcome in any way, anywhere," she continues. Putin is hated everywhere. Not that he cares about that. Koffler also argued that Ukraine is a clear loser due to its staggering losses in industrial and agricultural bases, devastated energy infrastructure, and the slow slide away from true independence. Ukraine is going to permanently depend on the West for its gross domestic product, with the U.S. leading the rest of the countries with $196 billion in total military, financial, and humanitarian aid. Koffler picked out only one clear winner from the conflict: China, which has seen its 2 biggest powerhouse competitors severely depleted throughout the conflict, as well as having some kind of preview of how the West might react to a Taiwan invasion scenario. China is witnessing 2 of its top perceived adversaries decimating each other's weapons stockpiles. They're using a lot of weaponry, she says. Some of these weapon systems will take some 5 to 18 years to replace. We simply don't have the production capacity to replace everything that we need. And in a potential conflict with Russia, that'll be a big problem. And China has also witnessed the Western response to Russia's strategies, and it can start planning counter strategies. Singleton, whose expertise focuses on China, agreed that Beijing will be closely monitoring the outcome of the war to determine where it stands with Russia. But China has already been able to negotiate very favorable energy deals. He also acknowledged that regardless of the outcome, Russia remains vulnerable to Chinese predation and could end up a vassal. But the relatively unproductive economy in Russia would make it more of a problem for Beijing. China will be eager to take advantage of opportunities to negotiate cheap, secure supplies of energy to meet its insatiable demand for energy resources, but at the same time, if the Chinese are perceived to have to keep Russia afloat, that is likely, I think, to exacerbate existing tension between the two countries. Estonian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Urmas Reinsalu, was quoted as saying in an interview that there would be tectonic differences in Europe's power balance after the war, especially if Russia faced complete failure. I think Central Asian countries, Caucasus countries, Moldova, and I think from his fortification, also Lukashenko, Reinsalu says, because if Ukraine wins the war, I think it would surely also be the protest of the president of Belarus, people against the regime. And also, surely, I think the outcome of the war would also be a game changer. Reinsalu called the outcome of the war decisive not only for Ukrainians, but for many countries. He also stressed the need for a tribunal to investigate Russia for alleged war crimes, which Ukraine claims have documented to over 60,000 cases. Victoria Coates, Senior Research Fellow at the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom and former National Security Council official for the Trump administration, praised some NATO allies for stepping up to support Ukraine, which she thinks has also helped position them for a more stable future defense. The final potential winner would be what former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld referred to as New Europe. Poland, the Baltics, Romania, they've all stepped up, are spending more than 3% of their GDP on defense. Coates says that, noting in the event of a Russian victory, the permanent capture of any Ukrainian territory, Putin can use that to shore up political support at home and try it again and again and again. If Putin is prevented from claiming this victory, however, I think that we could really build towards greater peace and stability, particularly in Eastern Europe. But if he thinks in any way that he succeeded, then we'll be having this conversation again in 5 years, and 5 years after that, and 5 years after that. That's kind of a shitty prospect. Moving on. This is Klaus.
Not Klaus.
Yeah, Klaus. Romanian President Klaus Iohannis discussed energy, economic, and security issues in Bucharest Thursday with his visiting Moldovan counterpart, as the two neighbors seek to boost ties amid Russia's war in Ukraine. Iohannis' office said that the talks with Moldovan President Maia Sandu would aim to bring her country closer to the 27-nation European Union, to which Romania belongs. Afterwards, Sandu said Moldova's strategic partnership with NATO member Romania is yielding concrete benefits. Moldova is going through unprecedented challenges, Sandu said, adding that over the past year, her country has faced security challenges aimed at creating chaos and destabilizing our region. Both countries border on Ukraine. Sandu's visit came a week after she claimed Moscow was allegedly plotting to overthrow Moldova's government, but the nation or put the nation at the disposal of Russia and derail its aspirations to join the EU. Russia strongly denies her claims. Some wanted our country to fall, to be able to establish a puppet government in Chisinau, servile to the interests of the Kremlin. The Republic of Moldova remains determined on its way to the EU. Over the past year, Moldova, a former Soviet republic of about 2.6 million people, has sought closer ties with its Western partners. Last June, it was granted EU candidate status, the same day as Ukraine. Since Russia invaded Ukraine a year ago, Moldova has faced a strong string of crises. These include severe energy problems after Moscow dramatically reduced gas supplies, rocketing inflation, several missiles that have traversed the skies from the fighting next door, and a huge inflow of war refugees. Johannes vowed on Thursday to continue to support Moldova, saying it is not alone in facing these challenges. I reiterate Romania's firm condemnation of any Russian destabilization attempts, he says. Romania remains particularly vigilant towards Russia's hybrid actions, which are intensifying at the end of the year of a war. On Thursday, Russia's defense ministry claimed that without evidence that Ukraine is planning an armed provocation against Moldova's Moscow-backed breakaway region of Transnistria, Russia maintains that about 1,500 peacekeeping troops are in the region, which is internationally recognized as part of Moldova. Moldovan authorities said that they could not confirm the Russian assertion, but would inform the public in case of any danger to the country. This reminds me of something.
Mm.
I don't know if I have it as a story here, so I'll just tell you. One of Russia's biggest former satellite state allies has now officially gone on the record as pro-Ukraine, anti-Russian.
Really? Which one?
Serbia,
Ooh.
which
that's
the timing of that's perfect because Croatia, on the other hand, is pro-Soviet. And what was Croatia and Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina? What were they all part of once upon a time?
There were a couple others, but we'll ignore that. They were part of this great Soviet satellite nation called Yugoslavia.
There you go. I'm glad you caught on to that.
I know.
So
You know I'm prepared.
the kids are infighting, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Well,
It's
this
okay.
is explained to me by a friend that lives in Croatia.
Go
Wow.
ahead.
Most of the people in Croatia are anti-Soviet and anti-Russian.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the people in charge
Aren't.
were born. The people in charge of Croatia right now are still the same people that were born and grew up in the Soviet Union.
Yes, it's the next generation
So,
of neo politicians that will
As I
fix
said,
that.
as I said, you can take people out of the Soviet Union, but you
Mhm.
cannot take the Soviet Union out of the people.
Mhm.
You know, that has to be, squelched first before you can actually get anything done democratically, or even in a republic.
One thing I can tell you for sure. I have 3 personal friends. One is a Polish guy, one is a Bosnian guy, and one is a Serbian guy. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, all 3 of them hate Putin. All 3 of them support Ukraine.
For a moment there, it sounded like a setup for a really good Soviet satellite joke.
No, sorry. I've been doing this for 3 hours and 14 minutes. I'm getting fatigued. All right, moving on.
Oh, hold on. How much
Mhm.
left?
Stories wise?
Yes.
8. But they're all short ones.
You said that. You said that. An hour ago.
Well, you'll see. UK protest, right? British police said Thursday that they have arrested 4 people after protesters painted a giant Ukrainian flag on the road outside the Russian embassy in London. This photo is, well, the evidence of that. The campaign group, led by donkeys, said that they painted the 5,400 square foot blue and yellow flag to mark 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine. It said activists wanted to remind Russian President Vladimir Putin that Ukraine is an independent state and a people with every right to self-determination. The group said activists safely halted cars before pouring 35 gallons of paint on the road. Vehicles then spread the paint in both directions to create the flag. London's Metropolitan Police said officers arrested 3 men and a woman on suspicions of criminal damage and obstructing the highway. As of today, they still remain in custody. Now, that was this whole story. Like I said, that was a short one, right? But if you hear what they did, they dumped 35 gallons of paint on the road, yellow in one lane, blue in the other. And then the cars running over it spread the paint for them. So every person driving a car is technically a co-conspirator to massive vandalism. And then they have the issue of having to go and take their car to a body shop to have all this paint removed off their car. Oops.
Oops.
Anyway, I thought it was cool. I thought the picture was cool. Moving on. This is the shotgun lightning round stories here because they're all quick ones. Poland's foreign ministry said Thursday that a Belarusian diplomat was asked to leave the country amid swelling tensions over the imprisonment of a prominent ethnic Polish journalist in Belarus. The defense attaché at the Embassy of Belarus was to leave Warsaw very soon. Foreign Ministry spokesman Lucas, I want to say it's Hasina. I don't know if Polish people pronounce J's with J's or with H's. Let's go with Lucas Hasina, but I'm probably not saying it right. Told Polish news agency PAP, P-A-P. Hasina said that the action was taken in response to Belarus recently expelling a Polish border guard liaison officer and 2 employees of Poland's consulate in Grodno. Bilateral relations between the neighboring nations were already strained by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko's support for Russia's military aggression in Ukraine. The ties between Belarus and Poland took a new hit this month when a court in Minsk handed an 8-year prison term to Andrzej, Pokrzywut. Probably didn't pronounce that right either. A well-known correspondent for Polish media. The court convicted Pokrzywut, 49, on February 8th of harming Belarus's national security and inciting discord. Not the server, inciting actual societal discord. In 2020, Pokrzywut, I know I'm not saying that right, reported extensively on massive anti-government protests that broke out following Lukashenko's disputed re-election in a vote that the opposition in Western countries regard as fraudulent. The journalist has been in custody since his detention in March of 21. Poland reacted to Pokrzywut's sentencing by suspending traffic at the country's main border crossing with Belarus in Bobroniki. Wow, that was a struggle. Sorry if I slaughtered that. Moving on, and this is called Fatherland Day. And this is the second one of these I've seen in a year now, because they did this last year too. Okay. Russian President Vladimir Putin said Wednesday that he will strengthen Russia's nuclear forces. This is the part that I was going to mention to you, Mike. Because you know how we were talking about that smart system and they're all backing out of it?
Mm-hmm.
And then you were saying that Russia can't maintain their arsenal? this story's for you.
Well, I was right.
Well, up until this story, you were.
Oh, come on, man.
You'll see. Putin said Wednesday that he will strengthen Russia's nuclear forces, announcing that his military is prepared to deploy a new intercontinental ballistic missile system with hypersonic missiles and employ his new nuclear submarines. The Belgorod was the first one of them. Or is it Novgorod? I think it's Belgorod. As the Russian invasion of Ukraine approaches its 1 year anniversary, Putin has declared that Russia will pull back from the New START treaty negotiated with the United States, signaling his intention to ramp up the country's nuclear armaments. In a speech commemorating Defender of the Fatherland Day, a Russian holiday that honors the country's armed forces, Putin said Russia will continue to focus on strengthening the nuclear triad. He said that the new RS-28 Sarmat liquid-fueled missile, also known as the Satan II, is ready for combat deployment after a years-long delay. The nuclear triad refers to missiles based on land, sea, and in the air. This year, the first Sarmat missile system launchers with the new heavy missile will be put on combat duty, Putin announced. We will continue full production of the Kinzhal air-launched hypersonic systems and begin mass deployment of the Zircon sea-launched hypersonic missiles. On Tuesday, Putin announced that Russia would suspend its participation in the START treaty, which caps the number of nuclear armaments each country can possess to 1,550 warheads deployed on delivery systems like ICBMs, or submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or on heavy bombers. He also threatened to resume testing nuclear weapons if Western nations do not cease their aid to Ukraine, which is suffering under brutal Russian invasion. Putin has characterized the conflict as an attempt by Russia to defend itself from encroaching Western powers and asserted that neo-Nazi forces have taken root in Ukraine. He has now violated Godwin's law for a full year. Russia's Sarmat missile is 115 feet long, and it has a range of 11,000 miles, and is capable to carry at least 10 multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, each with a nuclear warhead that could be aimed.
Up.
Am I?
Yeah, you're breaking in and out.
I don't know if it's me because my thing's still on the green light. Anyway, each with nuclear warheads that can be aimed at different targets. So basically, this thing is like a rocket-propelled bomber in a way because it can drop 10 warheads off of one rocket. Anyway, Putin also noted that the completion of a new nuclear-powered submarine called Emperor Alexander III, which is now operational in the Russian Navy. With the Borei A nuclear-powered submarine Emperor Alexander III becoming operational in the Navy, the share of modern weapons and equipment in the naval strategic nuclear forces will reach 100%, Putin says. In the coming years, 3 more cruisers from this project will be delivered to the Navy. Launched in late December, the Emperor Alexander III is the 7th Borei A-class submarine, which can carry 16 Bulava submarine-launched ballistic missiles, so it's an SSBN. Putin also reaffirmed Russia's commitment to developing modern and efficient conventional forces, relying on combat experience to pursue balanced and high-quality development of all components of the armed forces and improve the system for training units. We will continue to supply advanced equipment to our troops, including new strike systems, reconnaissance and communications equipment, drones, and artillery systems, Putin said.
Is that strike reply?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Our industry is quickly increasing the production of the entire range of conventional weapons and preparing for mass production of advanced models of equipment for the Army and Navy, as well as the aerospace forces. Basically what he's saying is he's getting the band back together And after he's backing out of this treaty, he's going to start building more nukes because he doesn't care about the rules anymore. He might not be able to maintain them, but apparently he can build them. That was the gist of that. Moving on.
Moving on.
Oh, wait, I have to go back to the other picture of Poland again because it's another Polish story.
Oh boy.
It is a quick one. Prosecutors in northeastern Poland have charged a Russian man living in Poland with having spied for Moscow between 2015 to 2022, officials said Thursday. The man, who was not identified, has been in custody since April. Groznia Varyniuk. Wow, please don't make me say that twice. A spokeswoman for the prosecutors of the city of Gdansk said he was accused of gathering and passing to Russian intelligence detailed information on Polish troops near the northeastern border with Russia's exclave of Kaliningrad. You know that thing that I said that they should demand back? The prosecutors said that the indictment was sent to a court in Gdansk on the Baltic Sea coast last week. It was not immediately clear when the suspect would be tried, but it is usually months before a trial is launched. If convicted, he could face a 10-year prison term. Sidebar: if you were convicted of that shit in the United States, the standard punishment for treason is hanging. If you're caught as a spy, you're either hung or shot. Poland's usually tense relations with Russia were frozen a year ago when Moscow attacked their mutual neighbor Ukraine. Poland supports Ukraine's struggle on the diplomatic level, but also providing armaments and humanitarian aid. That's all I got for that one. And now we are at... the countdown begins. This is number 5.
Final countdown.
Yep. 6 countries sided with Russia during a United Nations General Assembly resolution on Thursday, in which 141 countries voted... we talked about this. You talked about this. In which 141 countries voted to end hostilities in Ukraine and for Russia to withdraw its forces. Belarus, North Korea, Syria, Eritrea, Mali, and Nicaragua all joined Russia in opposing the declaration. While the resolution does not force Russia into leaving Ukraine, it signifies an international censure against Moscow's aggression. The vote marks a slight increase from the 4 countries who voted against an October resolution denouncing Russia's annexation of Ukrainian territories. Mali and Eritrea abstained from the vote during that time. The 6 countries opposing the resolution have developed close military ties with Russia. Amendments proposed by Belarus would have stripped much of the resolution's language, but were resoundingly defeated.
Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah.
Actually, of the countries that abstained,
Yes.
I'd like to mention them. Okay, you had in Algeria, Angola, Armenia, Bangladesh, Bolivia, Burundi, Central African Republic, China, Republic of Congo, Cuba, El Salvador, Ethiopia, Gabon, Guinea, India, and Iran abstained. Figure that one out. Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan also abstained. Laos abstained. Mongolia, Mozambique, Namibia, I think.
Namibia, yeah.
Namibia, Pakistan, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Tajikistan. One of the great stands.
Yep.
Because you think they'd be for it, but apparently they're not. They abstained, so they don't have a thing. Togo, Uganda, Uzbekistan. All the stands are against them, or they don't have the balls to say no or yes. Apparently,
I wonder
Vietnam,
if you're automatically abstained if you're not there, because if you look at the picture I used, a lot of seats are empty.
and the last 2 are Vietnam and Zimbabwe.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of abstains. But the ones that were against were Belarus,
Hmm.
North Korea,
Syria.
Eritrea, Mali, Nicaragua, Russia, Syria. But
Hmm.
notice how I said China abstained.
Yeah, they're okay. So I think you and I discussed this
Before
before.
China was with them, and China was was voting, in the UN for Russia.
Yeah, but they've always been non-committal.
They have, yes, they have.
They're like, "Ooh, these guys would make a good ally. We're totally in." And they see what happened in the first week, and they're like, "Not so sure." And then all of a sudden, it's like now they're on an offensive, and they've taken 4 regions of the east, and China's like, "We're your bro again." And they were like, "But we bombed a maternity hospital." It's like,
You
not
know,
our
but
bro.
you know how we were talking about Croatia
Hmm.
and Serbia?
Yes.
Well, apparently those countries voted for the. Wait, yeah, both those countries voted against Russia for the call to
That's
immediate
pretty interesting, seeing
war.
that Croatia is actually an ally of Russia.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you know,
So
and
basically, they're
so
they're
did
hedging their
Bosnia.
they're hedging their bets.
Bosnia voted for it too.
Yeah, they're politically hedging their bets.
Uh, But as I said, you look at the calls for the end of the war in Ukraine,
Yeah,
you can get a good idea of who would possibly, support Ukraine
sure.
in a global conflict.
Okay, I'm with you on that.
Okay. Anyways,
All right.
moving on.
Okay, so Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba took the 141-7 vote as a victory, saying it represents global support for Ukraine. This vote defies the argument that the global south does not stand on Ukraine's side, Kuleba said. Many countries representing Latin America, Africa, and Asia also voted in favor. Friday marks the 1 year anniversary since Russian military forces have invaded. The war has killed tens of thousands on both sides, demolishing entire Ukrainian cities and causing higher food and fuel cost prices worldwide. Moving on. Number 4, because, yeah, we're almost done. Russia is in talks with China to purchase at least 100 combat drones, according to a new report published just days after Antony Blinken said that the U.S. had evidence Beijing was weighing lethal aid to Moscow in its war against Ukraine.
You
Der,
don't say.
yeah, Der Spiegel reports that Moscow is looking to commission a Chinese manufacturer to mass produce the drones with a delivery date as early as April. Sidebar joke? Wish.com. Anyway, per the report, Xianbingo Intelligent Aviation Technology, a Chinese drone manufacturer, has said it was prepared to make 100 prototypes of its ZT-180 drone, which can carry a 35 to 50 kilogram warhead. The drones are similar to Iran's Shahed 136, which Russia has already used to kill hundreds of Ukrainians and damage their infrastructure. The report, citing sources familiar with the matter, says Bingo had plans to establish a productive site for drones in Russia. Former intelligence officer Rebecca Koffler argued that China's decision calculus is entirely rational, as helping Russia's military keeps the U.S. bogged down in Ukraine and focused on the European theater as Beijing eyes Taiwan. The biggest challenge for the United States would be to have to be engaged in 2 wars simultaneously, albeit by proxy, one with Russia on behalf of Ukraine and the other with China on behalf of Taiwan. Uh, no. See, we were engaged in 2 wars simultaneously back in the 40s. Perhaps
That's why I
somebody,
was about to say.
yeah, perhaps somebody should inform her of that. Anyway, also on Thursday, the UN General Assembly approved a non-binding resolution that calls for Russia to end hostilities with a vote of 141 to 7, with 32 abstentions. By overwhelmingly voting in favor of the UN General Assembly resolution today, these nations stood firmly in support of the rules-based international order and spoke with one voice to demand Russia's full, immediate, and unconditional withdrawal from all of Ukraine's territory. This came from National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Did you see the words he chose there? Very carefully. Full, immediate, and unconditional withdrawal from all of Ukraine's territory. All of it. That means Crimea. Anyway, we have made it to today, Friday. Well, today's Saturday now, if you're on the East Coast or Central, because it's past midnight.
Yes.
Sorry. We have reached
Well,
Friday. Friday's news. Okay?
it should be Saturday too for you.
It's already Saturday for me. Anyway, the Department of Defense has announced another $2 billion in defense spending for Ukraine. The financial aid comes in the form of security assistance packages that will build on previous aid supplied to the war-torn Eastern European country. In a Friday statement, the Pentagon outlined the armaments being provided in the new package, including 155mm artillery ammunition, mine-clearing equipment, rocket system munitions, electronic warfare detection equipment, high mobility artillery rocket systems ammunition, HIMARS, that thing there in the picture, and more. Ukraine's latest gift from the U.S. was announced on the one-year anniversary of the invasion, a solemn occasion noted by DoD officials. Today's solemn anniversary is an opportunity for all who believe in freedom, rules, and sovereignty to recommit ourselves to supporting Ukraine's brave defenders for the long haul, and to recall that the stakes of Russia's war stretch far beyond Ukraine, says Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin III. Austin boasted of U.S. spending on support of Ukraine over the past year, reflecting on $32 billion worth of assistance that includes more than 1,600 Stinger anti-aircraft systems, more than 8,500 Javelin anti-armor systems, 232 howitzers, and more than 2 million rounds of artillery ammunition, 38 HIMARS rocket systems and ammunition, a Patriot air defense battery, 8 National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, and other key air defense capabilities, 109 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, 31 Abrams tanks, which we don't have, and 90 Stryker armored personnel carriers. Austin spoke positively of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and its member states' global contributions to the war effort. NATO is more unified than ever, and that U.S. commitment to defend every inch of Allied territory remains ironclad. 1 year into a war of aggression waged by a permanent member of the UN Security Council, our allies and partners worldwide should stand united and resolute. He added Putin's reckless, illegal war is not just an all-out assault on Ukraine's sovereignty, but also as a historic threat to European security. And then we move to number 2. A defiant Ukrainian President Zelensky vowed, "We will defeat everyone," in video remarks released Friday on the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In the video titled "The Year of Invincibility," Zelensky sat at a desk and spoke directly to the camera, just as he had done so 1 year ago in a short address announcing that Russian military forces had launched a full-scale war against Ukraine. A year ago on this day, from this very place, at about 7 in the morning, I addressed you with a short statement. It only lasted 67 seconds. The wartime leader began in a 15-minute address. Quick sidebar, it is 7:10 a.m. in Ukraine right now, if I'm not mistaken. So we're doing it literally at the 1 year mark of his last speech.
Oh boy.
Yeah, 7 hours ahead.
Yeah, so it's 7:10 a.m. and the story says at about 7 in the morning, he addressed his people on this day 1 year ago. So we're doing it at the same time. How cool is that? It contained the two most important things then and now: that Russia started a full-scale war against us, and that we are strong. We are ready for anything. We will defeat everyone, because we are Ukraine, he says. The somber video comes as Ukrainians and the world reflect on the suffering and death brought by Russia's invasion. Tens of thousands are estimated to have died on the Ukrainian side, both civilian and military, and between 40 to 60,000 Russian soldiers have been killed, according to Ukrainian analysis that was supported by the UK government. Zelensky honored the men and women who did not raise the white flag and began to defend the blue and yellow. Though Russian President Vladimir Putin and many foreign observers expected Russian forces to overwhelm Kyiv within days, Zelensky praised the Ukrainian armed forces for defying expectations and fiercely defending their homeland for an entire year. The world saw what Ukraine is capable of, he says. It did not fall in 3 days. It stopped the second largest army of the world. He thanked medics who rescued wounded soldiers on the front line, performed surgeries under fire, delivered babies in bomb shelters, and stayed on duty for days and weeks, as well as civilian first responders who pull people out of the rubble and fire 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The Ukrainian president also thanked foreign allies in the anti-Putin coalition and said that he would deliver a separate address shortly on the international effort supporting Ukraine's defense against Russia. The White House on Friday announced a $2 billion security package for Ukraine, including artillery ammunition and new UAV systems, and counter-unmanned aerial systems equipment to strengthen the country's air defenses. The United States and its G7 partners are also set to roll out a new set of economic sanctions against Russia, and President Biden announced he will restrict certain exports to Russia and raise tariffs on imported Russian products. Zelensky offered his condolences for those who have lost friends and loved ones during the conflict. We will never rest until the Russian murderers face their deserved punishment, he says. The punishment of the International Tribunal, the judgment of God, of our warriors, or all of them together. Concluding, he promised to bring an end to the war in 2023 and rescue all Ukrainian citizens who are in the occupied territories or have been relocated to Russia against their will. Ukraine has not forgotten about you and has not given up on you. One way or another, we will liberate all of our land and all of its people. That's one hell of a speech. All right, and the last story I have for the day, which you probably never thought was coming. It's okay, we made it. We made it. And it involves all three of these guys.
No, we didn't.
A year of warfare in Ukraine has showed that President Biden is a terrible leader. I thought I'd end it on a good note, right? The saving grace?
I wish Frito was up.
Well, the saving grace is Vladimir Putin is far worse. That said, reliving
that's
the... Huh?
That is true too. He is worse.
Yeah.
But that's not saying anything nobody doesn't know already.
Well, that said, reliving the past is not what's most important right now. There are no do-overs in a war. Americans must think about what is next, the future of the U.S. in Europe. And because of Putin's many misjudgments, that future could be very promising, actually. The U.S. has a serious stake in a peaceful and prosperous Europe. That's why we're still in NATO. The alliance helps protect our interests. That is also why Russia and China want NATO gone and America out of Europe. The invasion of Ukraine was their biggest and boldest step towards that goal. So what happened? Well,
Well, you guys, you defenders want to.
For
They think that.
starters, Putin appears to be the worst war leader in modern history. He not only can't defeat Ukraine, he can't even consolidate control over the occupied territories of Ukraine. Still, persistent concerns that he might escalate the war remain. Well, who knows what Putin will do, but if he can't defeat Ukraine, will he really venture into attacking other nations like, say, Moldova as well? For the
Oh,
last year,
Belarus.
Poland
yeah. So
or
for the
Finland.
last year, Putin has fought every day, and every day his conventional land forces are weaker than they were the day before. It's kind of hard to see that changing. As we mark the anniversary, we should not forget that as titular leader of the free world, Biden's leadership has often been missing in action. It started before the invasion. Biden came into the office sending strong signals that he didn't care about Europe, Ukraine, or Russia. Then, when Russia was on the march, he spent a year doing nothing more than a finger wave and threatened tepid sanctions. Once the fighting began, Biden's brave first act was to encourage Ukraine's president to run away. If not for his humiliation in Afghanistan and the fact that Ukrainians refused to fall, Biden would have turned his back on Ukraine. Now we have Biden recasting himself as a fake hero. Sorry, but that doesn't sell. In his surprise trip to Kyiv, Biden declared, "We will be with you as long as it takes." That statement surely rings hollow in the ear of Afghans now living in Taliban hell, doesn't it? Blank check Biden is also apparently not concerned about spending. Little surprise. He treats the American taxpayer like his personal ATM. Still, Ukrainian support represents but a fraction of the $5 trillion deficit rung up by Biden. Trillion with a T. Most of it was wasted on pet domestic woke projects. Even the trip
And
to Ukraine is less admirable than it appears. If he wished to show American resolve, Biden should have gone to Kyiv when Ukraine was in maximum peril. You know, like how Boris Johnson did it. Instead, he withheld weapons that might have ended the conflict faster. But now he shows up, after first checking with Putin, to make sure it was safe enough to go. Spare me the bullshit. Let's be honest. There are feckless leaders in both Moscow and Washington. While we should have little faith in them, we can have faith in ourselves to make the best of the way forward. First, we need to put an end to the profligate ways of blank check Biden. The U.S. has already earmarked almost $200 billion in aid to Ukraine. Thankfully, we have new leadership in Congress that looks up to the task. Second, we need to think about what the future U.S. footprint in Europe should look like. Since the Russian conventional threat is greatly diminished, and our allies are waking up to their responsibilities to do more in their self-defense, a more limited presence makes sense. More forces could be rotational, but they have to be persistent and forward present on NATO's eastern front to deter future Russian recklessness. Third, we need to start building better partnerships in Europe. Europe knows Biden is a fair weather friend. There are many and a growing number of center-right governments in North, Central, and Southern Europe. Italy is but one example. These governments are pro-US, pro-NATO, anti-Putin, and anti-China. They have proven remarkably resilient through the tumult of inflation, energy prices, And the unsettling war in Ukraine, they are increasingly pro-family, pro-life, pro-parent directed education, and very much anti-woke policies. They get that progressive climate policy is, at this point, a ruinous pipe dream, and recognize that oil and gas will necessarily be part of our critical energy mix for decades. They're weaning themselves from their dependence on Russian energy and serious about their commitments to NATO. They see Russia losing in Ukraine as a part of a better future for the whole transatlantic community. They look forward to working with a resolute and dependable United States president who will be a real partner in building a better future that benefits both Americans and Europeans. So I thought I would end that on sort of an opinion piece type thing. So, okay. We have gone on for 3 hours and 51 minutes. I had
Let's
planned...
cut it here.
Huh?
Let's cut it here.
I had planned on doing our little World War III exercise, but I think because of how many stories we've had to do, we should probably save it for next week. Is that cool?
Mm-hmm.
That'll give... Well,
Yeah.
Scott will probably not be sick. And then if I can get us a shorter show, then I can get more people to play the game. So, okay. I guess we're all in agreement on that. So what I'm going to tell the audience then is we're going to do the sociological war scenario next Friday. That way, if you guys in the audience want to play along with it, you can email it to me. Okay? I'm gonna click my War Never Changes page right quick, and I'm gonna show you this message, and hopefully it works. Oh, it's way too big. Okay. Let me try to get this to fit in one thing. I'm going to try to get this all to fit in one box for you guys, so that way you can read it, or you can see it, or whatever. Let's see, can I cut this in half so I can get it in 2 messages? Really? Ah, okay. Let me get this out of there. And I could paste that back in there. And then I'll take this out of here. Maybe not that many. How about this much? 6 characters short. Okay, so I'll put that there. And then this here. And then this here. There you go. Alright, so the last 3 messages I just put in the YouTube side chat. If you want to play the game with us next week, it's not really a game, but if you want to participate in this, do that what if scenario. If you aren't a panelist, you can simply email it to me. My address is in the description of this video, the one that says Les Grossman, that one. Send it to that address, and what I'll do is I will read it on air after we do ours live. And that way we can mull over the things. If you're not a part of my server, the link to join it is also in the description. You can also put your answer in my War Never Changes channel in my Discord server if you don't want to email it. That's fine too. Just make sure you preface with what you're writing. Hey, this is the answer to that game thing you're doing. And we'll go ahead and read that out. So that way we can get as many people as possible into this, because essentially I want it to be as big as What a World War is perceived to be. So with that being said, we'll defer that till next week. And then that means I can go ahead and play this, because it has been 3 hours and 55 minutes, and I had a feeling it was going to be a long one today. So,
You think?
yeah, trust me, I had other things I wanted to do today. But anyway, this was the War Room. This was day 366 technically, or year 1, day 1. If you're new to my channel, welcome, but if you're a regular here, welcome back. Either way, check out my other playlists and see if my other interests may be of interest to you. We don't do them this big very often, but we made it, and we got through it, and we thank you for watching. So until next week, Slava Ukraini,
Heroyam Slava.
and good night.
Shall not be infringed!